been arrested after hundreds of children descended on a high street in southwest London. Groups gathered in Clapham last night and on Saturday after the so-called link-ups were arranged on TikTok and Snapchat. The disorder forced shops to close and 100 officers were also on the scene to try to disperse them. Shopkeeper Yassine has told LBC he thinks they'll do it again.
It was very dangerous. It was very dangerous because we thought they would rob our shop. We were just worried about our business. And we had to close quickly. Nobody can stop them. The police can't do anything about them. There needs to be a way to sort them out because people are losing businesses, just closing early. Sainsbury had to close at 5 o'clock.
And launch preparations have begun for NASA's first crewed mission to the moon in 53 years. Artemis 2 is due to launch from Florida tonight, taking 4 astronauts into lunar orbit. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 188 points at 10,364. The pound buys $1.33 and €1.14. LBC weather, patchy rain moving southeastwards across Wales, central and southern England tonight. Thicker cloud building across the northwest later, a low of -3. Bright for many to start tomorrow, but cloud gradually increasing from the west. Heavy rain moving into Northern Ireland and western Scotland later on, highs of 13 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Amelia Cox.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's 7:03 on LBC. Welcome to the programme. Remember, you can watch the whole 3 hours on the LBC YouTube channel. You can even comment, and we'll read out some of the comments during the programme. If you have a question for Cross Question, we'd love a few questions from the chat by the side of the YouTube video. Obviously, we're also available on the LBC app and Global Player. Now, yesterday, if you were listening, you will have heard me speculate about whether Donald Trump's comments yesterday were almost hinting that he intended to pull the United States out of NATO. Now, today, I think we can probably say that we were right in speculating that that was exactly what he meant. Because he's done an interview with The Telegraph. Donald Trump, I mean, does he spend all of his days doing media interviews? You wonder when he has a chance to run the country or run the war. But anyway, he's given an interview to The Telegraph, and he has said that he's strongly considering pulling the United States out of NATO after it failed to join his war on Iran. He labelled the alliance a paper tiger and said removing America from the defensive treaty was now beyond reconsideration. Well, that is a very big hint that that's exactly what he wants to do. No, it's not a hint. It's actually a declaration that that's what he wants to do. How seriously should we take that? Now, I'm not too hot on the American Constitution, but I'm pretty sure he can't just announce that and do it. I think there has to be congressional approval to pull the United States out of NATO, but maybe someone can enlighten us on that in the comments. I think this is a very, very serious day for European defence, and any European country that wants to be ostrich-like and put its head in the sand, I think is making a major mistake. Because I think all European countries need to come up with ideas about European collective security. And I include us in that. We are a European country. Just because we're not in the EU anymore does not mean that we cannot cooperate with other European countries. And I think it's also about time that countries like Ireland and Switzerland, who are both neutral countries, I think it's about time that they got with the agenda. Ireland has always hidden under the skirts of NATO and indeed under British defence, and it's about time Ireland contributed to collective European security. Similarly, I think with Switzerland. I know Switzerland has always been a neutral country, but it does have substantial armed forces. So are you taking Donald Trump seriously on this? Well, let's see if the Prime Minister is, because this morning he gave a speech and then a press conference in Downing Street, and he was asked about Trump's comments in this interview and his criticisms of the capabilities of Britain's armed forces.
NATO is the single most effective military alliance the world has ever seen, and it has kept us safe for many decades, and we are fully committed to NATO. Secondly, that whatever the pressure on me and others, whatever the noise, I'm going to act in the British national interest in all the decisions that I make. And that's why I've been absolutely clear that this is not our war, and we're not going to get dragged into it. But I'm equally clear that when it comes to defence and security and our economic future, we have to have closer ties with Europe. That's why we had the summit last year. This year, as I've just announced, there'll be a further summit. We will make good on the commitments that we put in place last year, but we will also go further in relation to the alignment.
Brigadier General Mark Kimmett joins me, former US Assistant Secretary of State for Political Military Affairs and also previously the US Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defence for the Middle East. Mark, thank you for coming on the programme again. How seriously do you take these comments by Donald Trump, and do you think there would be support within the United States for the United States to withdraw from NATO?
Well, as a little bit of my background, I was also the senior military assistant to the NATO military commanders, so I know this quite well, and I've served under NATO command in Bosnia and in Kosovo. First of all, you were correct. The NATO Charter is a treaty of the United States, so the president alone can't revoke the treaty. He can suspend the treaty, and I think what we ought to be thinking less about the legalistic and more of the practical, which is the president could certainly hold back on support for NATO in any future operation. We used to do what we called force generation conferences for NATO operations. And in that force generation conference, we would be putting spaces to faces and the contributions of the individual countries to the staffs and the units for that particular NATO mission. The easiest way for the United States to signal its displeasure is just offer no soldiers or equipment or staff officers to that major operation. So it's not so much an issue of de jure as it is de facto.
One of my correspondents here is speculating that America would never withdraw from NATO because it needs European bases. Do you think that's an argument?
It certainly is. I'm not sure that's an argument that would be persuasive with Donald Trump, though.
And if you were advising a European government now, maybe the British government, would you just say, look, don't go over the top on this. You don't need to all meet to discuss an alternative to NATO. This is Donald Trump. He may change his mind. He's not going to be there in 2.5 years' time. So just bide your time.
I think that's correct. But the other advice I would give is listen very carefully, not necessarily to the tone or the words of Donald Trump, but his intent. And the fact remains, he is most displeased right now in something that the NATO countries would make a significant contribution to this current effort, which is to put a coalition or a NATO operation together to escort tankers in and out of the Strait of Hormuz. As non-belligerents, the United States has experience with this. In the tanker war of 1981 to 1988, the United States reflagged the Kuwaiti tankers and escorted them in and out of the strait. And Iran said, we don't want to bring the United States into the war, so let's keep it as a non-belligerent. And one can only ask if Iran wanted to drag Great Britain, France, and Germany, all of those with their tremendous mine, countermine capabilities, into the war.
Final question. I know you've got to go. If Putin decided to take advantage of the current world situation and send troops into Estonia, do you think that Donald Trump would invoke Article 5 of NATO, or do you think he would agree to other members of NATO doing so?
He would certainly agree with other nations doing it. Now, whether he would in fact contribute to that operation, I think is a point of speculation.
But that would be the end of NATO, wouldn't it?
Not necessarily. I mean, there have been numerous times when other NATO nations have not contributed to NATO operations or have had national caveats that really precluded them from doing anything but guarding the front gates. So I think, again, it's not an issue of de jure. De jure, the United States will stay into NATO. De facto, they may be the least contributing nation of any operation going into Estonia.
Thank you very much. That's Brigadier General Mark Kimmett. Sophia Gaston joins me now, geopolitical analyst who's a senior research fellow of the Centre for Statecraft and National Security at King's College London. Sophia, very good evening to you. How do you react to this? Well, it's more than a threat, isn't it, by Donald Trump? He clearly does intend to withdraw the United States from NATO.
I don't necessarily think that he intends to withdraw the United States from NATO, but I think it's certainly true that there will be a more focused conversation this year now than there perhaps would have been. I think certainly, there are a number of people in the administration who still do understand that America has its own sovereign interests in remaining in NATO. I mean, it's partly why I've always been skeptical that he would pull out. I mean, for example, the Arctic and the High North, which has a lot of NATO countries defending that front line, that is part of America's homeland defense now. It's part of their Western Hemisphere strategy. So that's always going to give them a kind of regional link into NATO, aside from all the other considerations. So I think there's enough balance of interest and power within the administration be outside the president who do believe this. Then obviously you do have the kind of practical obstacles to such a withdrawal needing to get through Congress. And I think it should be noted as well, it was Marco Rubio actually who really did spearhead and champion the change in the legislation to make it so that you would have to have a 2/3 majority in the Senate to in any way tinker with that treaty. But all that said, it is true that a loss of American kind of strategic investment or focus in NATO, and perhaps the injection of some more ambiguity around whether or not it would uphold NATO's articles, could be extremely damaging for the alliance, even very much short of a withdrawal.
So what you're saying is he may not be able to withdraw because the Senate wouldn't, it just wouldn't have 2/3 of the Senate voting to withdraw, would it? So therefore, you think he would effectively undermine NATO from within, which might be even worse.
Well, I don't think it would be worse, but I think it would be extremely damaging. I must, reinforce that I do not think that this is going to happen, but I think that Trump is absolutely serious in the scrutiny that he is placing on the European allies here right now. And I think the reality is, if I look at the way that Europe is reacting to these comments, once again, there's a very kind of hysterical online debate about this. But the truth is that really, in substantive terms, the big European powers, Britain included, has done very little to actually substantively increase the spending on defense and investment in vital capabilities that we would actually need to do to in any way be able to withstand a US withdrawal from NATO. And for that reason, it's always going to be in our best interests in the meantime to have a kind of measured diplomacy with the United States, even if President Trump is, engaging in some inflammatory rhetoric.
That's not quite true, is it? That since he first suggested that European countries should increase defence spending, many of them have, not all, many of them have overtaken the UK in defence spending in terms of percentage of GDP. So people have taken that on board. Now, he will say, well, they haven't spent enough. I would probably agree, and I certainly think we haven't spent enough, but hopefully that will change over the next few years. But what do you think the reaction of European countries should be? Should there be some sort of European summit where they try to come to an agreement about collective European security?
Well, firstly, on the spending, yes, the Nordics, the Baltics, the Eastern European nations have absolutely stepped up and are spending, an appropriate amount on vital defense. But frankly, Britain and the other big partners, we've been far too slow on this. We really haven't been engaging in the kind of big bang that we would need to actually be able to scramble to fill the gap. We do still remain deeply reliant on the United States. And I think the events of the last few weeks have just made absolutely clear the sort of parlous state of our armed forces. And, there's no one else to blame for that but us. Obviously now, the decisions taken by the United States in Iran and the economic impact of that is going to make it even more costly for us to make these investments. But, that's by the by. In terms of convening a summit, that's what the NATO summit is for every year. And, we have another one this year. It's actually being hosted in Turkey, which will be interesting. And, I think at the end of the day, we need less talking and more planning and fundamentally more spending. And what it comes down to is the big powers, and by that I mean Britain, France, Germany, and so on, having serious conversations with their publics about the choices that we face. I think it's quite clear that the European publics are becoming more and more concerned about the relationship with the United States, and yet there's no commensurate investment in developing any kind of viable alternative.
Thank you very much indeed. That's Sophia Gaston there from King's College London. Right, we'll come to your calls in a moment. 0345 6060 973. I think this is a very serious day for collective European security. It's all very well to say, well, this won't happen. He's just blustering in his normal way. But it could. Yes, it does need Senate ratification, but it is possible that some of the Democrats in the Senate might think this is a good idea and manage to get the 2/3 majority. I think it's doubtful, but nothing is impossible in politics nowadays, is it? So how should we react to this? How should other European countries react to this? Does this make the case for more collective European security? Does it make the case, I hesitate to say it, for a European army? 0345 6060 973. You're listening to LBC. I'm Iain Dale. It's 19 minutes past 7.
This is LBC.
Right, who's all in for Cancer Research UK's Race for Life? Sunday Leaguers, dog lovers, beat clubbers, banga dancers, baby ravers, potters. Whether you walk it, jog it, or run it, go all in against cancer. All in to help fund life-saving research. Sign up now and save 50% off entry to your local 3K, 5K, 10K or Pretty Muddy event. Search Race for Life. Discount ends April 19th, 2026. T's and C's apply.
JP Morgan Personal Investing gives you the clarity to make more informed decisions on your investments, which is great because right now something else just became crystal clear. Your kid just outgrew the kids menu. Now he's ordering a truffle gnocchi? You consider making a don't gnocchi it till you try it joke. But now's not the time. Now's the time to grow his world, one bite at a time. Search JP Morgan Personal Investing. Invest with clarity. Capital at risk.
Just been out there briefly.
Stuck waiting again.
Tell me about it. I've spent all morning trying to get through to my GP.
Oh, I ditched that stress and joined Benenden Health. They've got a 24/7 GP helpline. No waiting rooms, no sitting around.
Really? Sounds like a great service, unlike this one.
We're just about to get moving again.
Press play on your health with the 24/7 GP helpline and much more. All for less than £16 per person per month. Search Benenden Health. Fee reviewed periodically. T's and C's apply. Qualifying periods apply for some services. UK only. Visit benenden.co.uk.
Iain Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
20 past 7 on LBC. Sheena. Not my sister, Sheena, I don't think. She says the entire population of Ireland is about the same size as London. Not exactly going to make up for the US, is it? Well, I never said it was. It's actually about half the size of London. But that doesn't matter. I think every nation in Europe has got to be conscious of the changing world situation. We had Finland and Sweden joining NATO, two previously neutral countries, because they recognise the threat to European security from Russia at the moment. And I think it's high time that Ireland had a national debate about whether Ireland should renounce its traditional neutrality. Switzerland, I think, is probably a bit of a different case. But Switzerland is very conscious of its own defence. I don't know if they still have conscription in Switzerland, but they certainly did up to not that many years ago. Right, we're talking about how Britain and the rest of Europe should react to Donald Trump's threat to withdraw the US from NATO. Let's go to Brent in Derby. Hello, Brent.
Hello, my friend. First of all, London's population is 9 million. Ireland's population is 5.28 million.
Yeah, exactly.
So it nearly is. In fact, there are as many Londoners alive as there are Irish people. And as many Londoners alive as there are Irish and Welsh people, actually. We put the population of London into those two countries. So I'm taking a bit of umbrage with you. I normally agree.
Well, hang on. You've just confirmed that what I said London is roughly twice the size of Ireland.
Roughly, yeah. The thing about Ireland you've got to understand is the biggest threat to Irish security has come from 900 years of occupation by British colonial and imperial forces. I'm sure there's plenty of Irish people listening going, you want us to change our neutrality policy because what? We're threatened by who this time? Because the greatest threat has come from Brexit. I grew up on the border between the north and the south. I grew up in the Troubles. I didn't have Russian soldiers on the streets. There wasn't a Russian problem when I grew up. The problems we had was legacy of imperial policies. And yes, what Ukraine is happening to Ukraine happened to Ireland. So it's quite weird to find people in Britain going, it's terrible what's happened to Ukraine, when the bigger neighbour like Russia invades Ukraine, and not all these British people go, oh, it's not terrible, let's defend Ukraine. When can Ireland in the room put their hand up and go, yeah, we know how that feels. We get you.
Yeah, yeah. Historically, obviously, you've got a point, but you don't believe that Britain is a threat to Irish security now, obviously.
One word, Brexit. Did you vote for Brexit?
I did.
Right. So that weakened Europe, weakened basically Europe. That's the Russians are laughing their head off. What the Russian foreign minister said, Britain's on its knees and they're laughing. So if you really...
Well, the European Union was never a defensive pact. It was an economic entity.
Well, it was an economic entity because it was set up as the European coal and steel community initially to stop Germany and France from having another war.
Correct.
And that objective was achieved. And that was the idea of bringing Europe together into a stronger economy, which would been divided by Russia.
And I fully supported that.
Yeah, and that's really what it's done, because if you look at the last 80-odd years, Europe has been collectively secure. Oh, yes, I agree, under the umbrella of America, but Europe has also been collectively secure because Europe's got stronger together, and that's what Ireland is doing. So its defence is tied into the European Union. It is Britain who has lost that. It's Britain who's weakened itself. Ireland's got stronger. Its defence spending has increased. It's reached out to the European Union. And you've got to be careful of sort of saying, well, Ireland's got to do its bit. 86 members of the Irish security forces have lost their lives in UN activities. Lebanon, anywhere there's a conflict, Ireland will go there. During World War II, yes, Ireland is neutral, but my grandfather and many other Irish people volunteered to fight fascism. When the call comes, Irish people will fight, and we always will. But you've got to understand our philosophy. We are not an imperial power. We do not like it when the big bully comes knocking. 1/3 of all the forces fighting Napoleon, guess where they come from, including Wellington? That was the Irish as well. So it's not as if we don't like a good fight, because it's in our nature that we like to stand up for ourselves.
I don't disagree with much of what you said there, but you know as well as I do that Russian submarines have been found in Irish waters in recent years. And what happens when that happens is the Irish government rings up the British government and says, can you send some of your submarines or the RAF to check out what's going on here? All I'm saying is that I think Ireland needs to, and this is a debate that's going on in the Republic. I know it is. A lot of people are thinking that maybe things have got to change.
Possibly, but that's what the country that Ireland is. We have a debate about it because the long-standing neutrality is being challenged. Obviously, the new world order is changing. But we've always had historical links with America, like ourselves. We're now out of step with America. You saw it on St. Patrick's Day, where a lot of people were having to go at the Irish Taoiseach for going over and sitting with Donald Trump. So you're correct, the world order is changing. But you can't lecture, what I'm trying to say to you, and you can't lecture Irish people.
No, I'm honestly not trying to lecture. I'm genuinely not trying to lecture anybody. But I think I am reflecting a debate that's going on in Ireland. And by the way, credit to Micheál Martin when he was sitting next to Donald Trump, and he did actually defend Keir Starmer when Donald Trump started to have a go at him. So, I mean, credit for that.
The fine irony on that.
I know, exactly.
Although he did get into trouble with his comments about, Winston Churchill was a great war leader. That was the same Winston Churchill who sent the Black and Tans to burn Cork down. Not exactly popular in Irish parts. We've got an interesting relationship with things like this. And it is, our history is important to us. But we are living in the world now in 2026. But that world has been directed by British failures, not Irish failures. It's British failures with Brexit has left this country weak, and not Irish failures. So if anything, we should be basically saying to Britain, spend your money wisely, because if you look at the Irish Army, percentage of population, it's higher than the UK, and yet we're a neutral country. So it's actually Britain, I think, has had the mistake. But should war ever happen again, Ian, I'm sure Irish people will come to the call as they did in both world wars and always do. It's just sad that we sometimes can't see that other people make mistakes and just go ahead and make the same mistakes over and over again. Last point, you know who invented the submarine, don't you?
Go on.
It was an Irishman, actually, and sold the technology to the Americans, ironically.
Well, can I tell you something? You might be surprised by this, but I'm currently embarking on writing a book called On This Day in Ireland. And I have discovered, on choosing all the different subjects I'm going to allocate to each of the days, there are so many things about discoveries, about Irish literature, about Irish scientific discoveries, Nobel Prize winners, that I had no clue about before. So I might use you as a consultant on this book, Brent, because you're clearly very well informed.
You're welcome, more than welcome. Well, I educate these things, so that's why I do it, Ian.
Yeah.
But I get your point about the collective security, but you've also got to understand from our point of view, from an Irish point of view, we don't like big countries making messes, and this always seems to be the smaller countries, like Denmark's been picked on by America. We would stand with Europe because Ireland is a very pro-European country, because Europe has been good for Ireland. You look at its economy, you look at its people, it's a forward-thinking country. And yes, there is a squeaking debate coming in, a few things coming into Ireland that, like the neutrality, but even Ireland for the Irish thing, which is weird to find far right taking a hold in Ireland. You know, of all the countries in the world with 96 million people around the world, you don't think so. Things are changing. I do accept your point, but the bulk of the Irish people at the moment would be very careful about following our increasing militarism, because we know what war feels like. We know what imperialism feels like. And should Russia step over a line, you know, the British Army would be swelled with ranks of Irish people volunteering, as has always been. It just would be nice that we wouldn't have to suffer the mistakes what we've had to suffer, and learn the lessons over and over again.
Do you think you've had a fair crack, Brent?
I think I have. Do you think I've had a fair crack?
Well, we know that Irish people love a good crack, so thank you.
You're welcome.
What a great call. You see, I love calls like that because, I mean, I know, okay, I said something slightly provocative at the beginning, but this is actually genuinely a debate which is going on in Ireland at the moment. Why do I know this? Because I was on an Irish political podcast a few months ago where it was brought up. And in a way, you have to understand the history, certainly between Ireland and Britain, to really get that. But also, if Ireland is a neutral country, how can it take such a partisan stance on Israel and Gaza? I mean, I think if you want neutrality, you've got to do it the Swiss style, haven't you? You can't sort of say, well, we'll be neutral on this, but not neutral on that. Let's take a couple of texts before we go to the break. Actually, we have a YouTube chat comment from Kevin who says, a European army, what are we contributing? It took us 3 weeks to muster a patched-up destroyer. Well, that is a very fair point. Stu says, America can't leave NATO. It needs European bases. It's pure folly. The best thing the rational world can do is just ignore the idiot in the White House. Stephen says, NATO is a treaty. So, actually, I think we've already read that one. Here's another one from Charlie. Trump would need Congress to take America out of NATO. Trouble is, Congress has no backbone to stand up to Trump. That you may say that now. After November and the midterms, it may be very, very different. And Martin says, Ireland isn't a member of NATO. It has no responsibility for any NATO missions. Yes, they should build a more robust defence establishment, but remain as militarily neutral. OK, more of your calls to come, 0345 6060 973. And in a moment, we'll find out about the vulnerable children who are being sent to unregulated care homes, leaving them at risk of exploitation and abuse. This is an LBC exclusive investigation. It's 7:30 on LBC. Let's get the news headlines with Amelia Cox.
Iran has rejected claims by Donald Trump that it asked for a ceasefire, calling them false and baseless. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister has dismissed the US President's comments that he is seriously considering leaving NATO. Scott Mills says he has been subject to rumour and speculation after being sacked by the BBC earlier this week. In a statement released by his lawyer, the presenter says he fully cooperated with the police investigation in 2018, which was eventually dropped. And 4 astronauts have arrived at the launch pad ahead of the first mission towards the moon in more than 50 years. NASA's Artemis 2 rocket is due to take off from Florida tonight. LBC weather, patchy rain moving southeastwards across Wales, central and southern England tonight. Thicker cloud building across the northwest later, a low of -3 degrees.
LBC. This is LBC with Iain Dale. Call 0345 6060 973.
7:33 on LBC. We'll come back to your calls on Trump and NATO in just a moment. But first, an LBC investigation with the Bureau of Investigative Journalists can reveal thousands of the most vulnerable children in society are being sent to illegal and unregulated care homes, some of which are staffed by convicted criminals. LBC's crime correspondent Andy Hughes has spent the last 3 months looking into care homes that operate outside the law and uncovered one of the worst safeguarding failures in the care system in recent history before confronting the owner of the Durham care home. And a warning, this report does contain some details listeners might find distressing.
Hi there, my name's Andy Hughes. I'm a journalist. What is this place? Is this a care home?
No, not anymore.
It used to be.
It used to be.
This quiet street in County Durham is where, until recently, one of the 800 illegal care homes looked after some of the most vulnerable children in our society. They are unregulated and unregistered, making tens of thousands of pounds each week as local authorities scramble to place kids in care. And as I'm walking around, it's immediately clear that this is no place for an at-risk youngster.
These doors have all got like holes in here, so I don't know what this is about.
Right. So you can see here a hole that's been drilled into the door, and through that hole you can actually see through it into the room. So that's what the carers were doing. They were clearly spying on the kids through this little hole.
There was a boy here one time and he was hanging out the window upstairs. He tried to get out the bathroom window, and they were outside filming the carers on the phones laughing at him, and they put the bin underneath for him to drop down.
It was in this building where one of the most shocking safeguarding failures imaginable took place. 2 carers, both ex-military and both who had criminal convictions, drugged and raped a 15-year-old girl who were calling Alice. Liam Ramsey and Stephen Hurst, both in their 40s, were sentenced to a combined total of 20 years. But I wanted to find out who hired these monsters. Records show the property was under the control of a company named Map Adventures, and the director is another ex-military man, Paul McRory. I discovered that he's living in Cyprus, and, to my surprise, he agrees to speak to me, joining me via a video link from the terrace of a local bar.
I didn't interview him. I didn't, and this is not passing the buck in any sort, because it obviously comes down to me. I was 3,000 miles away.
Stephen Hurst had 2 convictions, one for affray and one for battery. One relates to beating up his wife. Liam Ramsey, 2 offences of assault, drink driving and growing cannabis. Does that sound to you like a CV appropriate for caring for vulnerable children?
I have friends that were sent to jail in my regiment who are now serving captains and majors. One's an Apache pilot. in this modern day, if you're going to go down that route, then everyone's going to be unemployed.
Yeah, but Paul, these two men went on to rape, drug a young girl. And you seem to be excusing yourself for employing them.
The only apology that I'm going to give is that they didn't get they were held in remand. So if they were released, they were going to get removed, and I was going to deal with them personally. And my justice would have been swift.
What do you mean by that?
Use your imagination.
Well, why don't you enlighten me, Paul?
It would have been swiftly dispatched.
Yeah, but you're responsible for this care home, Paul, aren't you? The buck stops with you.
I asked him on the inquiry and I said, is there anything I could have done to have stopped this? He said, no, Paul.
I'll tell you how you could have stopped it. Looking into these and not employing two convicted criminals to look after the most vulnerable children in society. That's how you could have prevented it, Paul. It seems to me that this was a totally lawless place, and you created an environment which allowed a young girl to be raped.
Just 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
2 minutes go by, and Paul ends the call. While it's clear he doesn't want to take responsibility for his actions, a disturbing question remains about how thousands of our most vulnerable young people end up in unregulated care homes. Ofsted refused to comment on Alice's case, but said it is working hard to investigate unregistered children's homes. But shockingly, despite there being over 800 of these illegal, unregistered care homes, there is no public record of any of the homeowners being successfully prosecuted.
LBC's crime correspondent Andy Hughes reporting there, and you can get more on his investigation by subscribing to the Crime Agents podcast on the LBC app or Global Player. Just talking about podcasts, there's a new episode of my All Talk podcast out today with the Labour MP Naz Shah. She's talking about her book Honoured, where, she had the most, astonishing childhood where she and her mother were accused of murder. And it really is quite the story. It's well worth a download if you have time to listen to it. And you can do that, obviously, on Global Player, the LBC app, or wherever you get your podcasts. Right, back to Donald Trump and NATO. John in Reading is spoiling us. I think this is your third call in a week, John.
I know. I can't help it, Ian. You're so likable.
Well, I'm glad to be so addictive.
Are you seriously writing the book about Ireland?
Yeah.
Oh, mate, you need to include in there some really good places to get Guinness, because I always have problems whenever I go to Ireland.
Yeah, there is going to be an entry on the creation of Guinness. That is one of the entries, you're right. Anyway, what would you like to say?
Yeah, so my point being is just, a couple of questions. Question hours, basically, like a month back, I rang you up and I said about nuclear weapons and Donald Trump, would he actually use it? And then we were like, I'm and-ahhing about it. Now we're at the stage now where Donald Trump is considering moving out of NATO. Either two things. One, he's really severely mentally unwell, and the Americans aren't doing anything about it, because we can take, for example, Biden, the American, in particular, the White House, don't deal with their presidents, especially when they are mentally unwell. And we can take that from Biden. Whether you're Democrat or Republican, there's something severely wrong with Trump. The second thing we could talk about on it is that whatever Putin has on Donald Trump must be so severe that it's causing him to pull out of NATO. Now, we can look at all of these different sort of conclusions that I've come across and just say to the Americans that we're sort of sick and tired, and there needs to be a red line along the way with the Americans, and just say, if this is the way you want to act, we need to detach ourselves in such a way that it tells them that we're done. Not saying that we can't come back to it, but we're saying that we can leave and you alone and deal with our own lives in our own way. So, for example one would be set a timeline for example, like 10 years, and say, look, we're going to completely ban all American armaments in 10 years, and we're going to only buy armaments from Europe.
Why would we do that?
Because it's set.
That's cutting off your nose to spite your face, isn't it? Because we all know at the moment, and I suspect it'll be the same in 10 years' time, the American sort of arms factories are far superior to those in Europe, and a lot of the equipment that we use is sourced from there. So
they are.
I don't think that could work.
No, but I see that's totally right. That's because we rely, and something you said this a little bit earlier before the break, is that we rely on the Americans for everything. We rely on them for everything, And so we don't want to make progress into actually arming ourselves and actually defending ourselves properly and putting the resources in, because we're so reliant on the Americans. If we actually have a scenario where we move away from the Americans and buying them in bulk, the military hardware, the military ammunition, we say, okay, we're going to buy from the Europeans. It gives us cause to actually upgrade ourselves and actually put emphasis on actually improving the way we actually...
Well, here's a radical idea. Yeah. How about having our own armaments factories? Because that's what we always had sort of before the First and Second World Wars. I mean, there's no law that says we can't create our own armaments industry. I mean, we do have arms manufacturers, but the government could make a real point of encouraging the private sector, or indeed, dare I say it, the government could set it up itself. Not sure that is necessarily the best way of doing it. John, thank you very much. Brent in Derby, you've started something off here. Pete says, rubbish. The first operational submarine was built by a Dutch inventor in 1620. Yeah, but did he actually invent the submarine, or did he build the first one? Anybody like to enlighten us on that? An interesting question. Let's go to Matt in Bristol. Hello, Matt.
Hi, Ian. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. What would you like to say?
We've not spoken before, but I'm working my way through my LBC bingo card. So I've come to you tonight.
Well, you struck lucky tonight, haven't you, Matt?
I have. I think that we just need to pull the sticky plaster off. It's going to happen. It's inevitable. He's going to somehow remove America from NATO, and then we're going to have to pick up the pieces. And I just feel like, and I don't want to go on a rant about Labour, but communications are so bad with this government. And so you're having phone calls like, oh, but what happens if America pulls out of NATO, blah, 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 blah. Like, worst case scenario here, they're going to pull out of NATO. So we need to have that Blitz spirit again, that Great Britain spirit of standing on our own 2 feet. Equally, and I explained to your producer, like, I'm not into conspiracy theories, and whether you voted for Brexit or not, we did Brexit. And I do believe, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist before you go there, but I do believe that maybe there was somewhere there was a plan somewhere that if Europe was weaker, then certain things might be more possible, i.e. the latest further invasion of Ukraine, etc., etc. So what we now need to do... Well,
the flaw in that argument is that the Russians had already invaded Ukraine by the time Brexit happened.
Crimea only.
Yeah,
Crimea.
Well, that's still
and
Ukraine.
Then it was, but it was a part of it, wasn't it? But I'm not arguing with you there. But I feel right now, Starmer today saying about closer ties with Europe, like, yes, like we can have closer ties. And your discussion, I can't remember the guy's name, but the Irish guy before the break.
Brent.
Brent. At the end of the day, like Ireland and Switzerland, they're within the continent of Europe, and whether they're in the EU or not in the EU, as we are now, and it doesn't really matter. But geographically, they would be affected if a strike happened, or if we were to be an unfortunate victim of a wider world conflict. So actually, I kind of feel like, let's draw some lines on the map for where we live rather than what our values are.
You play your bingo card, I play my pedant card, because Ireland is not on the continent of Europe, and nor is Great Britain. We are European countries, but we're not actually on the continent of Europe. Do you see what I mean?
Okay, right. I didn't know that. So I stand corrected. I've learned something. Okay, how can we be European countries but not on the continent of Europe? How does that possibly work?
Well, because the continent is a landmass, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, fair. Yeah, fair.
I think I've probably started something. I'm going to get abuse on the text screen now for saying, no, you're wrong on that.
I'm glad to have started.
Now, tell me who's left on your LBC bingo card.
I've done Tom and I've done Sheila.
Not many people can say that.
Not at the same time, though. I've got Nick and James in my daytime. I'm liking a bit of Ben Kentish right now, so I think an after 10 o'clock at some point.
Yeah, not tonight though, because James Hansen's on tonight because Ben's off, but he will be back next week. Thank you very much indeed, Matt. Now, on Cross Question later, well, I say later, it's only 14 minutes. We have Resham Kotecha from the Social Mobility Commission, Scarlett Maguire, political commentator, Alice Denby from City AM, and Harriet Simons from Politics Home. So you'll be able to ask them any question you like after 8 o'clock. And I've just been told by Chris that Cornelius Drebbel, a Dutch engineer who built the first navigable submarine in 1620, which was a rowing boat covered in leather. On the other hand, Brendan says Leonardo da Vinci invented the submarine. So the jury seems to still be out. Can we solve this mystery by 8 o'clock? It's 7:47.
On the latest episode of The Newsagents.
Trump is now saying he's considering pulling out of NATO. Has he finally had enough of the defence organisation? And where does this leave the rest of Europe?
Get the latest episode of The Newsagents with Emily Maitlis, John Sopel and Lewis Goodall. Listen or watch on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
When we think of Easter, why do our brains go straight to eggs wrapped in foil and not lamb joints resting in foil? Think outside the chalky egg box and enjoy a third off delicious British lamb joints. Cook them low and slow until tender enough to carve with a spoon. Or roast with a rosemary and lemon thyme infusion. Chocolate eggs are only the beginning. Save a third on all British lamb roasting joints at Waitrose, the home of food lovers. Selected lines in stores subject to availability. Prices may vary in Channel Islands, Little Waitrose and Partners and concessions. Offer in 6th of April.
Hey you! Yeah, you! What would you like from your investing app? 6% interest on your ISA, a free share of your choice, or no commission on stocks and ETFs up to €100,000 per month? With XTB, you get all of the above all in one app, the XTB app. Get your free share and start investing with XTB today. XTB, where your money works.
Capital at risk. Investment values can rise or fall. Limited free stock availability. 2% ISA rate boost for 90 days. New clients only. T's and C's apply.
What's the best present you ever got for your birthday? I bet it wasn't as life-changing as £1 million. Every week with the birthday draw, there's £1 million to be won. And you can enter from as little as £1 or via post. And for this week only, we're also guaranteeing 5 winners of £20,000 in our bonus draw. Enter by midnight on Sunday to be in the draw. Visit thebirthdaydraw.com. Is it your lucky day? From Global and ITV. 18 plus, UK only, no purchase necessary.
With up to £3,000 every year towards career growth at Amazon, I started in the warehouse, knowing I could train in things like coding or robotics. It turns my job into a career. So it means I can be who I want to be, even if I haven't quite decided who that is yet.
Amazon, opening doors with up to £3,000 every year towards career growth. Eligibility conditions about type and duration of employment apply.
Iain Dale on LBC.
Sarah, the submarine mystery deepens. Sarah, I'm feeling like James. I feel like James O'Brien. I'm channeling James O'Brien at the moment with his mystery hour. Sarah says, I reckon it was the Beatles what invented the submarine. Well, they may have invented a yellow one, but who invented a red one or a green one? I think I'm going slightly delirious. Let's go to Afsal in High Wycombe, who can bring us back on track and talk about Donald Trump and NATO, unless you have a submarine theory, Afsal.
I don't have a submarine theory.
Good.
First time caller in your
Welcome.
show, but I'd like to say that I think what we should have been doing really since 2014 was looking to pursue a more independent strategy, which I think, frankly, is the only thing that we can do now, regardless of what Trump decides today and decides to the opposite tomorrow. It is him saying he wants to get the US out of NATO, whatever. It shouldn't matter to us. Our only path should be working towards more coordination with Germany, France, and other major European powers, and preparing for the US essentially kicking off of NATO. I don't know if you saw Lewis Goodall's tour of CPAC.
I didn't, but I'm going to let you into a little secret here. I have been to CPAC twice, back in 2007 and 2008 or 2006, I think. And it is, I don't think it then was as big as it is now. And I was there sort of in a journalistic capacity. It is quite the event.
Yeah, it's a completely different machine now, though. I mean,
well, they were fairly barking mad then, but I think they've gone completely off radar now.
Yeah, I mean, they've gone off the scale now. But if you look at the sentiment towards Europe and the United Kingdom, it is not positive. They do not want to help us. And if you look at elements of the US cabinet, they are nativist, they are isolationist. They do want to pull out of Europe. They don't want to be with European allies who they view as a dead weight on the US. And that means fundamentally our national security is at risk here. And we wouldn't do well to keep our national security tied to a nation where the electorate can decide, okay, we're going to have a Democrat for 4 years who might reaffirm, the US's position on NATO, but then might also get elected out for a Republican who says the complete opposite. I think it would be a complete disregarding of the stewardship that government has for this country's national security, has for security on the continent, if we do allow ourselves to be as tied into US defense, whether that's in armaments, whether that's in coordination. And I think that the previous caller talked about, European manufacturing and buying arms from Europe. I think what we could probably do is the UK government could or should offer some sort of government bond that citizens can buy to fund
totally
European
agree.
advisors coming in and industry intelligence, because we don't have the industry expertise for it, but they do. And we can invite that in and say, hey, look, we want you to help us build an industry base, and we want to contribute to this project, and we want our armed forces to grow.
I think that's a brilliant idea. Shall I tell you a little, very quick, funny anecdote from my visit to CPAC? I was sitting on a couch. It was at the Hilton Hotel in Washington, and I was just sitting on a couch, minding my own business. And these two young ladies from Alabama sat down next to me, and I was just sort of earwigging their conversation, as you do. And I heard one of them turn to the other and say, "Do you know, I've never met a gay person before." So I immediately turned around, held up my hand, and I said, "Well, now you have." It was quite a moment. I've got a few other anecdotes from that, but we'll leave them for another time. But I shall go and watch Lewis Goodall there, because I can imagine he had a very interesting time. This comes from Kieran, who says, this might clear it up for you on the submarine front. John Philip Holland, Irish engineer, born 1841, died 1914. That's 200 years after. So do we think, Chris is the adjudicator on this, do we think that that's the winner? Right, okay, a James O'Brien board game will be winging its way to you, Kieran. Or actually it won't, but you can live in hope. Right, Diane is in Bourne in Lincolnshire. Hello, Diane.
Good evening, how are you?
Evening, very good, thank you. What would you like to say?
I've been listening to the conversation, and I hear us banging on about our security. But have you thought about the fact that over the past years, how many times the US, we are moaning about might want to leave the alliance, how many nations they have invaded? And the other alliances have not called them out for their illegal acts. And each time they go in a country, take for example, they went into Venezuela, and they said, "Oh, their oil is ours." So this is like holding up a nation, taking what they have in broad daylight without the alliances, the members in the alliance calling them out for.
Well, I think you have to draw a little bit of differentiation here, because NATO is a defensive alliance. What they did in Venezuela was nothing to do with NATO. The only NATO operation in recent years that I can recall where you might have an issue with was Afghanistan, but all the other NATO members agreed with that and supplied soldiers and airmen and sailors, not sailors, to take part in that. But that was authorised also by the United Nations.
So, Iain, what I'm saying is, when Russia invaded Ukraine, every country who were against it call it out for what it is. All the time, they did an illegal invasion. However, when the US does it,
Oh no, I think that's an entirely reasonable point to make, and I think you can make that about Iran, where, I mean, to be fair, America has been quite clear that I think they've described it themselves as a war of aggression. It's not under the auspices of NATO, though, and various European countries, including our own, have called out Donald Trump on that.
So what I'm saying is, so America is doing all that they're doing in all the other people's country without any form of accountability. But when other countries do it, they are being constantly saying,
okay.
"Oh, you are
No,
wrong,
it's
wrong."
a fair point to make, Diane. Thank you. Let's go finish off the hour with David in Thornaby on Tees. David, you're a first-time caller. Welcome. What would you like to say?
Hi. I've just been the headlines, with Trump attacking NATO and attacking Europe, and this, that, and the other. And it just seems to be like we're essentially in an abusive relationship, And I mean, what they sort of tell you with an abusive relationship is regardless of, you're not going to stay in an abusive relationship for, he beats me up, but I'm financially secure. We're being treated increasingly more and more and more abusively by him. And the way, I don't really understand why we're still sort of kowtowing to him and trying to.
Okay, well, let me use your analogy.
I understand he's the most, they're the most powerful country in the world, but by the same token, Trump is the kind of person who, if you give him attention, he is going to essentially think he's going to use that. Regardless, and being diplomatic with him just doesn't work. I would honestly say what we should be doing is what abusive in an abusive relationship. What you do, you block the calls. You change your locks, and essentially you collect up his clothes in a bin and throw it out the window. That's basically what we should be doing.
Yeah, and that would give me. No, I know, I get what you're saying, but let me throw that analogy back at you, because often in an abusive relationship, someone can't bring themselves to end the relationship immediately. They wait a bit. We've only got to wait 2.5 years. Now that may sound a long time, but he will be gone in 2.5 years.
Yeah, he may not be though. What I'm trying to say to you is, Iran has shown how much power a country that, if you actually look at the sort of the difference between America's might and Iran. They're showing that, essentially they've got him on the ropes. And basically, I think Europe, if they just sort of said, well, we don't want anything to do with you, we don't want anything to do with you economically, militarily, or anything. And basically,
we couldn't do that. 20% of our exports go to America. It's not quite as high for the European Union, but it's not far off. We would be committing economic suicide if we did that. But a good analogy there, David, and thank you very much for your call. Right, in the next hour, we will convene the Wednesday Cross Question panel. We have with us Resham Kotecha, Deputy Chair of the Social Mobility Commission, Scarlett Maguire, political commentator, former communications consultant to the Labour Party, Alice Denby, opinion and features editor of City AM, and Harriet Simons, political reporter for Politics Home. She's making her debut on the show. So if you have a question about maybe the subject that we've covered in the last hour, give us a call, or indeed anything else. 0345 6060 973. We'll probably exclude calls about submarines in this hour if you don't mind. And you can text 84850, and you can watch on Global Player, the LBC app, and the LBC YouTube channel.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, Donald Trump's warning he's seriously considering pulling out of NATO. Sophia Gaston, a geopolitical analyst, told LBC she doubts that will happen.
There are a number of people in the administration who still do understand that America has its own sovereign interests in remaining in NATO. Then obviously you do have the kind of practical obstacles, such a withdrawal needing to get through Congress.
The US president suggested yesterday the war with Iran could be over in 2 to 3 weeks, and earlier that Iran had asked for a ceasefire. Tehran's called the claims false. Scott Mills says he's been subject of rumour and speculation in his first statement since he was sacked by the BBC. The radio presenter says he fully cooperated with a police investigation into an alleged historical sexual offence that was dropped over a lack of evidence. A man's been arrested on suspicion of murder after a woman in her 80s was stabbed to death outside her home in southeast London. Police found her with serious injuries in Plumstead this morning. And 4 astronauts have arrived at the launch pad ahead of the first mission towards the moon in more than 50 years. NASA's Artemis 2 rocket is due to take off from Florida tonight. In the city, the FTSE 100's closed at 188 points at 10,364. The pound buys $1.33 and €1.14. LBC weather: patchy rain moving across Wales, central and southern England tonight, a low of -3. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
You probably think you're pretty good at multitasking behind the wheel. I mean, you have to multitask to drive. So what's wrong with checking your phone? The thing is, your brain simply for quick reply, affects your concentration, and makes you less able to react to hazards. If you use a mobile phone while driving, you're 4 times more likely to crash. Think. Put your phone away.
I've looked after my kids since they were born. Now they've got kids. I still want to look after them. I don't want them struggling to make decisions about my money or my health if I can't. So we made a lasting power of attorney. Now, if I can't speak for myself, they'll speak for me. It's a weight off for all of us, isn't it?
Yes, Mum. Lasting power of attorney. Search your voice, your decision.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello and welcome to Wednesday's Cross Question. It's 8:03 here on LBC. We have a star panel for you tonight. It's an all-female panel. We do occasionally have an all-male panel, but more often we have all-female panels because that's the politically correct thing to do nowadays.
No, it's because we're much more interesting than men.
So what's the opposite of misogynist?
Gynocrat.
Misandrist. What?
Gynocrat.
A gynocrat?
Yeah.
I thought it was misandrist, isn't it?
Well, could be.
Anyway, I haven't even introduced them yet, and they're already causing trouble. To my left, that was the voice of Scarlett Maguire, political commentator, former communications consultant to the Labour Party. Next to her, being very quiet and polite, is our debutante tonight, Harriet Simons, political reporter for Politics Home. Welcome to you.
Thank you.
To my right, we have Resham Kotecha, Deputy Chair of the Social Mobility Commission and also the Global Head of Policy of the Open Data Institute. That's a very forbidding job title. We might ask what it means in a moment.
Please do.
And next to her is Alice Denby, Opinion and Features Editor of City AM. Right, you can phone us 0345 6060 973. You can text on 84850. You can WhatsApp us on 0345 6060 973. If you're watching on YouTube, we may well read out a few of your comments. I gather they're fairly spicy on the YouTube channel, so do sort of make sure that they are readable, outable. I know that's not a phrase, but there we go. And you can watch us on the LBC app and Global Player, as well as the LBC YouTube channel.
0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Cross Question. Watch live on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
Right, let's go to our first call. It's Chris in Richmond. Hello, Chris.
Hello, Ian panel. Does the panel agree that certain politicians in this country have egg on their face given Trump's decision to make a beast-to-Haiti retreat from Iran?
Well, we don't know that he's made that decision yet, do we?
Well, I mean, come on, he's pretty much said it in so many words, isn't he? Why do you think the stock market has rocketed up today across the world? It's pretty clear in that.
Well, he is going to be making a speech at 2:00 in the morning where he is expected to say something along those lines. But then tomorrow he may say the complete opposite, I suppose. Alice Denby.
Oh, gosh. I find...
Well, someone has to go first.
Look, it's very difficult with Trump because, frankly, you can't believe a word he says. There's no truth attached to his statements, but nonetheless you have to behave as though it is true. So with him saying things like he may well pull out of NATO, who knows if that's the case or not, but we have to act as though it might be, which means we need to make sure that we are in a position to defend himself. And I think that perhaps argues against what this caller's point was, that I think what he was trying to suggest was that certain politicians, like I think he means Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage, who sort of at the start of this war, I think were a bit more gung-ho and saying that we should stand by Trump, now have egg on their faces. I think there's two ways to look at that, right? So on the one hand, had we been a bit nicer to Trump at the start, maybe he wouldn't now be saying, I'm going to completely upturn the defence pact that has secured our peace in the post-war era and that remains vital to our national security. And then on the other hand, I think it's plain that this war in Iran was a mad adventure that is going to completely, already has in fact, destroyed the global economy. And I don't see how that can have been his intention. So I suppose where I come down, and sorry if this is a bit indecisive to your caller, but I think where I do ultimately come down is that Keir Starmer was probably right to keep us out of this ultimately, but he hasn't protected us from the damage this has already done to our economy.
Well, he couldn't, could he?
Well, there was very little he could do, but what we're facing now is going to be a global recession. And we're in a very weak place to withstand something like that because our economy is weak, because borrowing is high, because taxes are high. This isn't entirely Keir Starmer's fault. It was the last administration's fault as well. But, we cannot borrow any more money to see people through this crisis. And people who are already struggling with the cost of living cannot cope with any further tax rises. And this government has also shown itself incapable of cutting any public spending. So from that front, I think I suppose where I come down is Keir Starmer was probably right to keep us out of the war, but he's not put us in a very strong position to defend ourselves.
Scarlett Maguire.
Yes, I think to think that because Trump went into it and he's supposed to be an ally, everything that he did before the war, he was incredibly rude about us. He refused to join in with NATO about Ukraine, but instead sold us the weapons that we needed. So he's been terrible. And then to go into a war with, if you want people to back you up, you talk them through it. And what he seems to have forgotten is that NATO is a defensive. It's not an aggressive. Basically, the last time that it's Article 5, isn't it, was on 9/11 when NATO...
The only time it's been done was for the Americans.
So I really am furious that he comes across. But actually, I think I think it's incredible that he says, you do the Straits of Hormuz. This is a man who decided to attack Iran, has, as Alice says, completely wrecked the global economy. What we need is an apology, actually, from Donald Trump.
Good luck with that. Resham Kotecha.
So I think it's a really interesting question because actually, as Alice has referenced, we don't know what he'll say at 2 a.m., but we also don't know what he'll say at 2 p.m. tomorrow. Things could change that rapidly. So I guess the question for politicians that did support him or do support him is, do you still support him or believe that that was the right action to take? Because my view on this whole thing is we've got a relationship with Trump, but we also have a relationship with the USA, and that will continue long after Trump's term ends. So the question is, should we be stepping in to support, physically, hopefully not, but verbally or with intentions, the actions of our closest ally? Or should we be recognising that actually Trump is very dangerous right now? And I think we've been perfectly nice to Trump. I don't think being any nicer would have made any difference. He's had state visits. He's had, people who have previously, like Lammy, previously said things very critically of him, have kind of really pulled that back. I don't think any level of niceness would have helped. But I also don't think we have a prime minister that's particularly decisive or diplomatic. So I don't think we've got, the person.
He's been very diplomatic with Trump.
Oh, with Trump, I just meant more like in terms of leadership, making decisions. I don't really feel like he stands for what he's got in his head.
Harriet Simons.
Yeah, I think it's worth remembering that, at the start of Keir Starmer's premiership, he made such an effort with that relationship, sort of went out, everyone was calling it a masterclass, and for sort of at this moment in time for Trump to turn around and sort of say that Keir Starmer is no Winston Churchill. I mean, the relationship's clearly very unpredictable and not, it's just not one that you can rely on at the moment. And with Trump calling NATO sort of a paper tiger, I think it was, it's just insane, to be quite frank. And I think it really throws into question Article 5 and, what it would mean if a NATO member was attacked and, would the US be there?
Well, I was talking to Brigadier General Mark Kimmett earlier, who served, I think, in the Bush administration. And he was saying that, well, Trump wouldn't necessarily provide troops if Article 5 was invoked, but he wouldn't actually prevent NATO from defending Estonia, for example, if there was a Russian attack on Estonia.
And we're supposed to be grateful for that.
Well, I'm not. I certainly wasn't.
Honestly.
I wasn't saying that.
You plainly can't trust a word Trump says. So even he's in NATO, he's out of NATO. Who knows if he would defend us if we were attacked? We can't behave as though he might.
Yeah, I think NATO has got to work as though they don't have the US. Yeah. I mean, I completely agree with you that in the long term, we have a relationship with the United States. In the short term, we don't have an ally that we can trust.
Well, got another question here on this, which kind of goes into that. Robert in Leighton says, what is Britain's foreign policy other than hope for the best and pray that nothing else comes along to upset it, i.e., where is the strategy? I mean, the policy at the moment, I think, is hold your nose for 2.5 years and just pray it all goes away after that.
Well, in the short term, I hope we have a defence review that comes quickly because we need
We just had one.
Desperately.
The investment plan.
Yeah, the investment plan.
Oh, right.
As in the money.
Yes.
Because we need to start investing. We need to, as you say, we need to act as though we cannot count on the US to come in and defend us, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's Estonia, or anything worse than that. And actually, I think the reality is that we cannot defend ourselves. We do not have the capacity to do so. So unless we start making that investment, and every day we lose is a day we are becoming less safe.
But that's not a strategy, is it? I mean, that's a policy deployment. Surely the strategy has to be, well, if America is going to become this unreliable ally, surely the strategy has to look to see, well, okay, who are our allies in the future?
But that's exactly what's happening. I mean, basically, we're turning to Europe. I mean, to be fair, Keir Starmer before the election had spent a lot of time, David Lammy, a lot of time with Trump and his people in case they won their election. And then he did what some of us found very, very difficult, but he was very nice to Trump, had him over for the state visit and things like that. And he really did. And that was the strategy was keep Trump on side, then we'll keep Ukraine and the tariffs. And we did get there with tariffs. And then you find out, I mean, that as everybody's been saying, we have no idea what Trump's going to say at 2 a.m. this morning and less idea of what he's going to say at 2 p.m. tomorrow afternoon.
Scarlett's right that the government's strategy is closer alignment with Europe, both in defence but economically as well. And that, I think, raised a democratic question. I mean, we did vote for Brexit, and Rachel Reeves said quite clearly in her May lecture that she's essentially seeking regulatory alignment with the single market. The EU has made it very clear that you can't just cherry pick that. You're either in the single market or you're not. So I think it's pretty clear that Labour see the direction of travel as going back in the single market. Don't forget, Keir Starmer was shadow Brexit secretary, did everything he could to overturn that result. So there's a democratic question there. But I think it's surely pragmatic to align with our allies in Europe. But there is another sort of global alliance that I think we should also be looking at. And it was a case that was articulated, I think, really powerfully by Mark Carney at Davos, which is this sort of Kanzuk alliance of medium powers. So Canada, Australia, New Zealand and the UK, united by language, united by shared values, medium-sized economies, but with significant defence capabilities and a lot of trading potential with each other. So that is something I'd like the government to be looking at as well.
Well, I mean, they are, but one of the problems, of course, is that Australia and Canada came out for the war.
Yeah,
I mean, which really was shocking.
Well, I'm not sure they came out for the war. They said that they supported Donald Trump, which I suppose was
I think if you support Donald Trump when he's bombing Iran.
But I think there was a way that Keir Starmer could have played it very differently and not encourage these. I mean, I don't agree with the abuse that he's got from Trump, but I think there was a way through that. But just before we go to a break, Harriet, Alice was talking about sort of getting closer to Europe.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think there's any prospect that before the next election, Labour will actually come out and be honest and say, well, look, we do want to go back into the European Union?
Well, it was interesting, obviously, at the press conference today, Keir Starmer was asked directly about whether he was going to stick to his manifesto commitments not to go back into the single market, and he said resolutely that that was still the commitment. But it's no secret that he wants to bring Britain much closer to Europe on the economy, on security and defence, on those issues. Obviously, it was interesting a few weeks ago, I think, Sadiq Khan sort of coming out calling for Britain to rejoin. Speaking privately to Labour MPs, I think a lot of them agree, but no one is willing to come out publicly at the moment.
But that's political cowardice, isn't it?
It depends. Depends who you ask.
Well, I think I mean, if you're not a member of the government, you're an ordinary Labour backbencher. OK, it would be going against your party's policy. But do we just want 400 robots in Parliament? I mean, surely if they genuinely believe that would be the best thing for this country to go back into the EU, why wouldn't they be able to say it?
I think there's an enormous difference between the single market and going back into the EU.
Not really.
No, there really is. And actually, we voted to come out of the EU. At the time, there was a whole question about what we did about the single market. That wasn't a given at the time. It became a given, right? So I think the single market and the EU are very different.
Well, the single market is a part of the EU.
There'll be no option for us to have single market membership without EU membership anyway.
No, so I think customs union and that you're like Switzerland or Norway.
And then you take your regulation from Europe, and then your sovereignty is out the window again.
I think it's also very difficult in the era of reform. Like, they will just use this as an opportunity to sort of further themselves and say the referendum is attempted to be overturned, and sort of say that this is the government trying to sort of overturn the biggest democratic mandate that the country's ever had. So there's a lot of risk in doing that.
It is amazing to think that on June the 23rd this year, that is the 10th anniversary of the referendum. I mean, it doesn't. In some ways, it seems longer ago. In other ways, it seems much nearer, doesn't it? I'm sure we're going to be talking about that a lot come the day. Might have those 2 weeks off. It's 18 minutes past 8.
This is LBC.
Find me somebody to love.
At Dreams until Tuesday, the more you spend, the more you save, with up to £500 off. Dreams. Love your bed.
Your time is valuable. Your perspective should be too. The Economist cuts through the noise with the stories that truly shape your world.
How can you believe that a new regime won't crush you just like the previous one?
Online scams are stranger than they've ever been.
When the world's turned upside down, know which way is up. Read, watch, or listen to The Economist.
At EDF, we don't just encourage you to use less electricity. We actually reward you for it. That's why when you use less during peak times on weekdays, we give you free electricity on Sundays. How you use it is up to you. EDF. Change is in our power. Households who reduce their weekday peak electricity usage by 50% can earn up to 16 hours of free electricity per week, subject to fair usage. For all T's and C's, visit edfenergy.com/r-power.
Spring has sprung. Buy any 6 bottles of wine and save 25% at Waitrose. Perhaps a citrusy Lamonette agave, perfect with halloumi, fresh off the BBQ? Or Esprit de Puissignan with notes of ripe red berry. And maybe go all out with a crisp bottle of Veuve Clicquot champagne. Cheers to spring. Buy any 6 bottles of wine and fizz and save 25%. Waitrose, the home of food lovers.
Selected stores online, subject to availability, excludes Scotland box wines and bottles price £6 or under, £100 or over.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
90 minutes past 8 on LBC. Our panel tonight consists of Resham Kotecha, Deputy Chair of the Social Mobility Commission, Scarlett Maguire, political commentator, Alice Denby from City AM, and Harriet Simons from Politics Home. Right, a text question from Lynn. Sadiq Khan is insisting London is safe. just as youths start rioting in Clapham. Is London dangerous, and if so, why? Well, the London Mayor and also the Met Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, have asked Britain's ambassadors overseas to challenge the, quote, lies, in their words, that London is unsafe. But this came at the same time that almost 100 teenagers were running through the streets of Clapham in South London last night, causing shops to be closed. A similar event took place in Clapham on Saturday too. Alice.
Well, look, I'm here representing City AM, and I don't like anything that talks London down. So, of course, London is a safe city, but it was extremely alarming to see this essentially riot take place in Clapham, which people from London will know is a very posh neighbourhood.
Clapham.
In the M&S.
Yes.
South Chelsea.
This is like brunches, this is multi-million-pound houses.
Vegan restaurants.
I think they were blockaded themselves in an M&S.
As you would.
So
M&S food.
This is where you go to get your picky bits and go and sit on Clapham Common on a nice sunny day.
Picky bits? I've never heard that.
Oh, but that's what you get from M&S. Okay. Your hummus, your charcuteries. But
I think we're all learning a lot more about your Saturday activities.
Well, I did actually used to live in Clapham, and to be honest, I always felt more threatened by the crowds coming out of Infernos late at night. But look, this is besides the point. London is obviously a safe city, and actually, if you look at the overall crime statistics, serious crimes like murder and knife crime are coming down, but petty crimes, things like shoplifting and antisocial behaviour, and obviously this kind of thing that make people feel very unsafe, that's very visible, that's very alarming and very threatening to local communities, it does feel like is out of control.
But the narrative is that women, particularly young women, feel very unsafe in London. And I'm going to be very interested to hear all your views on that, speaking as women. Harriet?
Yeah, I mean, I think seeing the videos online and social media of the incident in Clapham, it does feed into this sense of sort of lawlessness and crime out of control in the city, and you kind of think, where are the parents in all this, given that it's the Easter break? But yeah, I do think there is an increasing sense, speaking to friends and myself going home late at night, that London has become more unsafe. In my area, I would say over the past few years, it does feel like there's more definitely petty crime happening. I've had my phone stolen from the top of my road a couple of years ago, and I don't really know anyone that hasn't these days. This is not a dig at Morgan McSweeney, by the way. But yeah, I do. Speaking to friends, I definitely do get the sense that there is definitely a fear.
So Morgan McSweeney is your friend?
No.
Has he actually had his phone stolen? That's the question. You might be the one person in London who hasn't.
Did you see the survey? About 5% of people believe he definitely had it stolen.
Right.
Is that right? Only 5%? Mm-hmm. That's appalling, isn't it, really? Scarlett, you and I have been around a little longer than Harriet and
Precisely.
Only a little. Do you feel that London, and I mean, you live in the hood, don't you?
I live in. I live.
We live around the corner from each other.
I often walk home at night. I often walk home along the Holloway Road, which is a big thoroughfare. It's not posh, and I never ever feel threatened, and I don't feel that. Of course, I mean, I'm very careful not to take my phone out when I try not to. I mean, if you look at the statistics, Alice is absolutely right that we've got one of the lowest murder rates for a capital city, and it's been going down all the time. All the big stuff is going down, but it is the petty crime. But I mean, I remember, in the 80s, people talked about being mugged all the time. I mean, it was absolutely crazy, and actually, I think it's much safer now. And I think what's happened is there are these bots. I mean, I was reading in London Centric today that these, I mean, and people are being paid to do hate thing because if you get a hate thing on Twitter, it's much more. So actually, there's a whole myth about how unsafe London is, and then the Daily Mail says, and people are frightened to go on the tube. I use the tube all the time. I use the tube over at night. I mean, actually, I think what's amazing is how nice most Londoners are.
Well, when you look at the statistics, I think you're absolutely right that most sort of serious crime is on the way down. I've never felt unsafe in London. Like you, Harry, I've had my phone nicked.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything else serious and I don't meet a lot of people who sort of feel unsafe. And I mean, I haven't seen these videos of what's happened in Clapham, but from the descriptions, I mean, it's hardly the Brixton riots of 1981, is it?
Which I was in the middle of and got mugged, can I say? And that really did upset me. I mean, for quite a long time. The thing about these Clapham is it's mostly teenage girls. And that's why the police are saying the parents have to take some responsibility. What are they doing, letting these kids out? And probably, they've just finished school, they've got GCSEs to come, and they're just feeling, it's all over, and they're crazy.
But that's still lawlessness, isn't it?
No,
I mean,
it's still lawlessness, but it has to be stopped. But I blame the parents.
Russian.
I wholeheartedly agree on the parenting, because actually I think the real challenge is we are seeing it, it's pervasive across society. We're seeing it from a really young age. Primary school children going to school, not potty trained, parents abusing teachers for disciplining their children, parents blaming teachers for the skills their children don't have that they should have before they even reach school, and I think that entitlement of children and parents from a young age means that actually we end up with situations where 16-year-olds think it's perfectly fine to loot, not to mention the fact we have essentially decriminalised shoplifting and phones being stolen. I don't think people even report it half the time anymore, other than to get your insurance claim. No one would bother. And your point about the bots are so important, because actually when you see it, the majority of people other than Elon Musk who are tweeting negatively about London are actually bots that are created by bad actors in countries like Russia, Iran and elsewhere. And actually what we're seeing is a broad trend of negative and bad actors wanting to use AI to create discord and distrust of cities. So of course London is safe. I think one of the psychological challenges of London is that before recent stories in the last 5-10 years, you felt you could trust the police as a woman. And I think now some of the cases we've seen where you realise that is actually not true means you might not instinctively feel like, I'm feeling a bit nervous, don't worry, I can see a policeman. A, you probably can't see a policeman, but B, even when you can see one, you might question, is that a safe person to go to, which I think is a real travesty, because the majority of the police, of course, are working hard to try and protect people, but psychologically you do now have that question of, can I actually trust this person?
Yeah, Rushton's actually right. I mean, the Met Police in particular has had serious problems. I mean, we've talked about Clapham, the murder of Sarah Everard happened in that same area. So, massive problems with the police, misogynistic abuse of victims and so on. So I think you're right. I think London is safe, but our police are a mess.
A comment from YouTube. Nikki says, London is a lot safer than many metropolises. Yeah, you see, this is the point when Donald Trump goes on about Sadiq Khan. Have a look in your own backyard. Look at Detroit. Look at Chicago. Look at parts of Los Angeles. All American cities have these problems. Of course, London has its problems too. All big cities do.
Yes. Of course they do.
But why aren't more people in public life pointing this out? I mean, you've all done a sterling job of that tonight, but I wish a lot of politicians on the left and right would really say this out loud, because they've got to counter this propaganda that you say these bots
The
are
Daily Mail
promulgating.
calls London the Wild West. It has a complete agenda.
They say from their desk in Kensington.
Precisely. They have an agenda of saying Sadiq Khan is terrible, and therefore it's all awful. And you say we should all say it, and we all say it.
But these things are not mutually exclusive. You can believe that Sadiq Khan has not done a good job as mayor of London, but also still believe that London is one of the best cities in the world, if not the best, which I would say it is.
Sorry, I didn't finish off reading Nikki's comment. she, or maybe he, says, saying it's dangerous is just something put out by Trump and his ghouls in the White House. All US cities are far more dangerous. Barry says the most dangerous person in London is the mayor.
Soon to be the Lord.
Well, yes. Indeed.
Which would be nice.
At least we don't have to, I find it very difficult to say Sir Sadiq. It just doesn't roll off the tongue. It doesn't seem natural.
I wouldn't dream of it.
I don't think he would insist on it, would he? Right, we'll go on to more questions in a moment. The next one is on Kanye West, who I believe is a popular music beat combo, Your Honour. It's 8:30 on LBC. Daryl Jackson has the news headlines.
Iran's rejected Donald Trump's claim that it's asked for a ceasefire hours before he speaks from the White House about the war. The US president also threatened to withdraw from NATO after allies didn't get involved in the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. Scott Mills says he fully cooperated with a 2016 police investigation relating to an allegation of a historical sexual offence. The case was dropped due to a lack of evidence, but he was sacked from the BBC earlier this week after it received new information. And launch preparations have begun for NASA's first crewed mission to the moon in 53 years. Artemis 2 is due to launch from Florida tonight, taking 4 astronauts into lunar orbit. LBC weather, patchy rain moving southeastwards across Wales, central and southern England tonight, a low of -3.
This is LBC.
Frustrating is printing a recipe where the quality fades with every ingredient. Smart is a printer that delivers high-quality ink over time. Stressful is your printer choosing check-in day to check out of ink. Smart is an HP Smart Tank with 3 years of cartridge-free ink. Oh, that's smart. So go on, search HP Smart Tank. Find the last printer you'll ever need.
All right, resistance up. Let's climb.
Okay, here we go.
Oh, my knee's playing up again.
Have you ever had it looked at?
No, but I've been doing a few stretches.
When my shoulder went, Benenden Health got me expert help. Showed me exactly where I was going wrong.
30 seconds, people.
Press play on your health with physiotherapy and much more. All for less than £16 per person per month. Search Benenden Health. Fee reviewed periodically. T's and C's apply. Qualifying periods apply for some services, including physio. UK only. Visit benenden.co.uk.
When we think of Easter, why do our brains go straight to eggs wrapped in foil and not lamb joints resting in foil? Think outside the chalky egg box and enjoy a third off delicious British lamb joints. Cook them low and slow until tender enough to carve with a spoon. Or roast with a rosemary and lemon thyme infusion. Chocolate eggs are only the beginning.
Save a third on all British lamb roasting joints at Waitrose, the home of food lovers.
Selected lines in stores subject to availability. Prices may vary in Channel Islands, Little Waitrose and Partners and concessions. Offer ends 6 of April.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
8:32. Harriet Simons is political reporter for Politics Home. Alice Denby, opinions and features editor at City AM. Scarlett Maguire, political commentator and former communications consultant of the Labour Party. And Resham Katecha, who's got very intimidating job titles, deputy chair of the Social Mobility Commission, and also the head of, not just the head of policy, the global head of policy of the Open Data Institute. What is the Open Data Institute? An institute that just gives open data, I suppose.
Very high level. We were co-founded by Sir Tim Berners-Lee and Sir Nigel Shadbolt to work on the data ecosystem, so to make sure that we can build a country where data, and now AI that builds on data, works for everyone. So thinking about open data, transparency, making sure, for example, we've got great assets in the government, lots of data sets, but we can't do anything with them. They don't talk to each other. So in the US, we've seen the government be able to link household income data, anonymised of course, with education outcomes and employment outcomes. You can really track what policies work and what don't. And here we have all the individual data sets between government departments. They just don't talk to each other. So things like that, where if we actually invested in our data infrastructure the way we do other public infrastructure, our policy would be turbocharged.
And you're writing a book?
I am, yes, which you very kindly gave me an interview for. So it's called How to...
Goodness knows what I've said that's of any interest on this subject, we will find out.
One of the best interviews I've done, Ian, actually.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't say a lot for the others, then.
Oh, dear.
Right, let's move on to a question from Rico. Should Kanye West be invited to perform in this country? Now, he's got a new album out, Harriet tells me, called Bully, which rather fits. Now, Jewish community groups and also Sir Sadiq Khan have condemned the Wireless Festival for booking Kanye West to headline the event in North London this summer, following his history of anti-Semitic behaviour, including describing himself as a Nazi, releasing a song called Heil Hitler, and associating with an American white supremacist called Nick Fuentes. Harriet?
Yes, well, I think blocking him would send a strong signal to the Jewish community that anti-Semitism is not welcome here. I think after the attack in Golders Green, amongst other attacks that have happened, this community is one that feels increasingly threatened. And to have someone who's made the comments that he's made sort of come to London.
Does it matter that he's apologised?
He's apologised, and he's obviously blamed it on his mental sort of health. I think it's good that he's apologised, but what if he makes similar comments during the festival? What then? I think protecting the Jewish community at this time is more important, to be honest.
And I mean, this festival, I gather, is in Finsbury Park, which is not that far from where both of you live. I mean, would you welcome him to this festival? Are you a festival goer, Scarlett?
I'm not a festival goer. I am aware when Finsbury Park, the Wireless, has their festival, because everything is blocked off. I mean, what one has to ask is, what on earth were the festival organisers doing asking him to headline it for 3 nights running? Which, I mean, that's what I find so shocking, is we know what he did. I don't know whether his form of bipolar is like Tourette's and things just come out. I have absolutely no idea. But, I mean, it is deeply, deeply offensive what he did. It's very good that he apologised. But he's since done it again. I mean, it's just crazy. And yeah, you just think, what the festival organisers, there are so many people they could have had, and they choose him.
They could have had Cliff. Rusham.
Yes, so actually, funnily enough, Harriet and I did hear Kanye at Wireless many years ago, where he did go off on a rant about Kim and the fashion industry and blah, blah, blah. I think, look, if there wasn't such a serious crisis of anti-Semitism in the country, I think it is perfectly reasonable to invite someone who has been very open about their struggles with bipolar, who has taken out, as we researched, a full-page advert to apologise for the remarks they'd made while having an episode. But I think we do have to think about the current situation and the fact we have a significant Jewish community feeling very kind of challenged, struggling with issues of arson and threats. And I think it's absolutely not the right time. And if I were to think about, do we want to rehabilitate someone with serious mental health issues, or do we want to make the Jewish community feel safe in this country, I would absolutely be looking at making sure all our communities feel safe. So I think it's a real travesty and a real inconsiderate move by Wireless, who I love, as a festival, to actually invite Kanye at this time.
Alice?
No, I'm not pleased that he's coming to London and headlining this festival for 3 nights, but a festival is a business after all. And when we're talking about the idea of blocking him, I mean, what are you actually suggesting, that the government should intervene in who a business invites to perform at its festivals?
Well, they could not allow him to come to the country because he's not conducive to the public good. They've done that before.
The question about that then is, what sort of fan base is he going to attract? Because if there is a fear here that all his fans are neo-Nazis who are going to turn up and pay for the tickets, then that's a different question. But I don't think that is the case. I mean, I think
he's got a very young audience
who maybe don't. So, but look, the point is that the festival clearly thinks that he's going to sell tickets, and I'd be alarmed at the precedent it would set if a government were to intervene in a business in that way. I think consumers should vote with their feet and make it clear that they don't welcome him by not buying tickets, frankly.
I think probably what will happen is just you'll see members of the Jewish community not going, which in essence means they'll be missing out on a festival they might potentially want to enjoy. And I do think it's a business decision, of course, but it's not like there's a shortage of fantastic performers that they could have invited. I think it was just a misstep of the organisers and a shame given the current situation for the Jewish community in the country.
LSA on the YouTube channel is complaining that I cut you off before you could give the title of your book.
LSA, thank you. It's called How to Influence the Government. It's published by Bloomsbury and it will be out next May. And I would love if you would read it. It's all about different campaigns.
2027?
2027.
Oh, God, that's a bit early to be plugging it.
Well, I'm sure you can buy it in advance copies very soon.
Right. Another question from Joseph. What do you think the government should do to encourage more women to engage in apprenticeships to acquire the practical skills necessary in order to support our house building programme? What a shame we haven't got the Apprenticeships Minister, Baroness Jackie Smith, with us tonight. She's actually a bit poorly at the moment, so we sent her our good wishes. Scarlett?
I mean, what's interesting is the way the new MP, who is a Green for Gorton, she is a plumber, and she had terrible, terrible problems being able to train as a plumber, and she wanted to train as other things, and was blocked, and eventually did it. And therefore, what the government's got to do is actually do positive role models like her, so that young women, I mean, this is what we want. We want the 16 to 18-year-olds who think, actually, I'd really like to do something with my hands, that they can do it. And I mean, it's very interesting if you listen to it, read the articles about Hannah Spencer, is she was told, oh, you won't be able to pick this up, you'll never be able to do that, you'll never be able to do that. And actually, so what you've got to do is you've got to make you've got to go into the colleges and say this can be done, but also talk to the men on the building sites so that they're hiring women. I mean, because you're right. I mean, we desperately. I mean, the country needs many, many more skilled house builders, and young women would be a great way to do it.
I mean, that is a problem, isn't it? Where you've got different industries where men over decades, if not centuries, have been the primary workers in those industries. They can be the main block. I mean, I remember I used to work in the ports industries. Was there a single female docker in the country? No. And the reason for that is because the Transport and General Workers Union would not allow them.
Oh, yeah. But I certainly, I mean, way back when there were no women post women, because the union wouldn't allow it, because they said, as long as there are unemployed men, women don't get to look at, because obviously, we only need pin money.
I mean, I'm not sure a lot of people know this, but it wasn't that long ago that if you got married as a woman, you weren't allowed to work in, civil service, for example. As soon as you got married, you had to resign your job.
It's till like 1973, I think.
Wow.
That's amazing, isn't it?
But I think we need to look at the supply and demand issue here too, right? It's obviously the challenge of, the wolf whistling and the very male environment on a house building. And actually, Jo Churchill, the former MP, she ran a construction company before she was elected, and she talked about the challenges there and how she had to work to succeed there. But the other issue is you look at how we raise girls, right, from a really young age. So I was on the board of the Fawcett Society for 6 years, and they've done lots of research on how we raise girls and boys as a society and as families. So we play with girl babies and girl children differently to boys. So girls will say things to them like, aren't you good? Aren't you pretty? Don't you look cute? And we teach them from a very young age, that they are something or they aren't, which means that when they start to find things difficult, they go, oh, I'm bad at maths. Whereas boys, because they struggle with concentration and things like that from a younger age, we say to them, oh, if only you tried harder. So we actually teach children to respond to challenge in different ways. But we also think about the toys we give girls and boys. Boys, we give them all these creative sets and sciencey sets and building sets, and we encourage them into STEM from a really young age. Girls, we don't tend to do that in the same way. So you talk about women wanting to do things at 16 to 18, but actually, if we haven't got them thinking about these sorts of opportunities and sectors earlier, by the time they get to 16 or 18, they're just not thinking about building as an opportunity.
Ban Barbie and Tiny Tiers on it.
Absolutely not. But why don't we have a house building Barbie with a little hammer? I learned how to anneal metal when I was at school.
Do what?
To anneal metal, using
I did metal work. I have no clue what you're talking about.
Oh, well, I still have a picture of me with the full metal mask and the fire and the flame, and that was a real point of pride for me to be able to go to the boys in my year and be like, look at what I can do,
And what reaction did you get?
Some of them were like, what's annealing metal, actually?
You can come back. Alice?
I'm quite sceptical of the idea that equality actually looks like men and women participating completely identically in the workforce. And I don't actually think it's that surprising that construction and jobs like that tend to be male-dominated. I think, obviously, you shouldn't block women from doing it, but I don't think we should be surprised if women do not choose to go into more physically demanding professions like that. And I think we've seen where that kind of thinking gets you with, for example, the case that bankrupted Birmingham about having to have complete gender equality in jobs. So you end up having to pay people who work in warehouses the exact same as people who work in retail, even though those are clearly completely different jobs, just because the retail jobs tend to be dominated by women and the warehouse jobs tend to be dominated by men.
Alice,
so I just don't buy that equality is like, okay, well, let's force all women to do incredibly physically demanding jobs which men are probably better suited for.
We're not forcing. What we're saying is we're opening up. But can I say that on the Birmingham thing, it's really important that it's about work of equal value, and that I
just don't buy that working in retail and warehouse is the same.
But so in Sunderland, the care workers are on a lower grade than the gardeners, and guess which care workers do an amazing work. They have to be incredibly skilled to do it. I mean, I talk to the care workers who, you have to be able to inject things into people's stomachs to feed them and that thing. I mean, it's work of equal value is really,
How
really
do you define
important.
what's of equal value?
Well, then you look at it, and that's what the law does. You look at it, but it's really, really important.
That's what markets do. Markets determine what a job is worth.
No, I mean,
supply and demand. It's not something that a government can just decide.
There's no law that can decide that.
Well, there is actually that actually, if you say so in Sunderland, the care workers, the carers said, why are we paid less than gardeners? And the union took it up, and they looked at what the skills a gardener needs and what the skills a care worker, and they said they should be equal. I mean,
and were they in the end?
They are. Yeah, they are. I mean, it's gone a lot in public services.
Harriet.
Yeah, I think it's slightly different. I think it's about visibility and aspiration. Like if young girls are seeing their peers in jobs that look like something that they would want to be doing themselves, that is, I think, the most attractive thing to get more young women into these jobs. And another point, rather depressingly, I think, all the conversations recently about student loans, why would anyone want to put themselves through that, seeing what my generation has gone through and the sort of debt that sort of mounted up that none of us could have anticipated? I think that's another sort of strong argument to say, actually, it doesn't have to be the university route. Apprenticeships can actually be just as beneficial, if not more beneficial, depending on what you want to do. So I think it's making it aspirational and trying to sell it to this generation.
But it needs to be aspirational to everyone, because what I don't want, and I totally agree with your point about student loans. So we spend a lot of time at the Social Mobility Commission looking at true opportunity for all. And what we don't want is for middle class people whose parents can afford to help them to go to university, and for people whose parents can't afford to help them to go to apprenticeships. Like, actually, we will have really good apprenticeships when we know that is considered by the middle classes just as good an opportunity for their children as university is. And until then, we'll end up with a two-tier system where you'll end up with the can afford university and the can'ts. Although the student loans thing is a travesty, and we need to change that. Yeah.
Jackie is enjoying the programme tonight. She says, Iain is on fire tonight. I parked up an hour ago and haven't got out of the car yet. The show is so good.
Oh, thanks, Jackie.
I mean, that is the measure of when you've got a good show, when people can't get out of the car because they might miss something. So I'll try.
According to her, only Ian's on fire.
No, actually, I was going to pay tribute to my panellists for making the show so good, but I won't bother now. It's 8:47.
This is LBC.
When we think of Easter, why do our brains go straight to eggs wrapped in foil and not lamb joints resting in foil? Think outside the chalky egg box and enjoy a third off delicious British lamb joints. Cook them low and slow until tender enough to carve with a spoon, or roast with a rosemary and lemon thyme infusion. Chocolate eggs are only the beginning. Save a third on all British lamb roasting joints at Waitrose, the home of food lovers.
Selected lines in stores subject to availability. Prices may vary in Channel Islands, Little Waitrose and Partners and concessions. Offer ends 6 of April.
With over 50 years' experience, Fidelity can help you feel confidently invested. Make the most of your annual allowances by the 5th of April with our expert insights, excellent service, and wealth of investment options. For ISAs, pensions, or advice, go to fidelity.co.uk. Your capital is at risk. Terms apply.
If you bought a home on a holiday park in the UK, what you thought you were getting may not be what you ended up with. From unexpected site fee increases, running costs, a huge depreciation in value, many owners feel they've been missold. If you think this might be you, holidayparkadvicecentre.co.uk could help you receive the compensation you're entitled to. Text ASSIST to 78900 to find out more. That's ASSIST to 78900.
Just been an all-day break flight.
Stuck waiting again.
Tell me about it. I've spent all morning trying to get through to my GP.
Oh, I ditched that stress and joined Bennenden Health. They've got a 24/7 GP helpline. No waiting rooms, no sitting around.
Really? Sounds like a great service, unlike this one.
We're just about to get moving again.
Press play on your health with the 24/7 GP helpline and much more. All for less than £16 per person per month. Search Bennenden Health. Fee reviewed periodically. T's and C's apply. Qualifying periods apply for some services. UK only. Visit bennenden.co.uk.
Take Irish ferries from Dover to Calais, where your pet travels in the pet lounge. You'd be barking not to. Irish ferries. See travel differently.
Leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
8:49 on LBC. Rasham Kotecha, Scarlett Maguire, Alice Denby and Harriet Simons. I knew I'd make that mistake.
Don't worry, everyone does.
Are with us. Text question from Nicole. Has Keir Starmer made the doctors' dispute worse? Now, The Times has reported tonight that the government has now withdrawn its offer to create 1,000 extra training posts for resident doctors this year because the British Medical Association has refused to call off the 6-day-long strike, which is due to begin from Tuesday. Resident doctors were offered a 3.5% pay increase for this year, which the BMA has rejected. Resham.
I mean, it's absolutely ludicrous, isn't it, to think that the response to a strike is to remove training posts, 1,000 training posts that this country needs. I'm honestly not sure what sort of negotiating tactic that is to punish the British
Well, it's brinkmanship.
public. Well, yeah, but I mean, it's brinkmanship. I studied game theory at university, and actually what you should do is make a credible threat that you are willing to go through with. And I do not believe that the government would be willing to go through with actually withdrawing those training posts.
Well, they just have.
Well, but how long will they stick with that? At some point later this year,
come on,
they'll have to.
I mean, Labour don't make U-turns.
Absolutely not.
Very cynical of you.
But I think it's a terrible way to carry out a negotiation. That's not good faith, I don't believe, and it's damaging to everyone involved. I do think it's an unnecessary strike, and I think it's a shame that the BMA are taking such a tough stance on it. It will hurt people at a time when people are already hurting. But I just think that the challenge here is you should not be negotiating on something that you won't follow through with, and I don't believe the government will long term.
Resham, sorry, Harriet.
Yeah, I mean, I do think the public have lost a lot of sympathy for doctors throughout this whole saga. I mean, I don't even know how many years it's been going on, these strikes now, and it seems to sort of be a never-ending cycle. But yeah, I don't think sort of threatening to take away training posts is a sort of sensible tactic to try and win doctors over or move the negotiations on. I think clearly some sort of compromise has got to be reached. But yeah, there's not a lot of money going around at the moment, and doctors have had more pay come their way than a lot of other sectors have. Like social workers, carers, all these really important industries.
Going back to your point about equality of value, isn't it?
Yeah. So I think it's really hard to make that argument to the public to give doctors an even more of a pay rise at this sort of time. Yeah.
I suppose they would argue, well, we know that inflation is going to go through the roof over the next 6 months because of the war in Iran, so therefore 3.5% is not enough.
Well, it's going to affect everyone, not just doctors.
What I do not understand, is why doctors think they're more important than policemen, than soldiers, than all the other, than teachers, all the people who accept. They were given a massive pay rise, which they said, but we have to go back to the way it used to be. And you think, it's not the way it used to be for any of us. I mean, all of us have suffered. I mean, the question about what the way it's being negotiated is can it get any worse? I mean, seriously, they were offered everything but money. They were off because they said, there's all these other things, and they would go on the TV and the radio.
Well, this time they said it wasn't about pay, but clearly it is.
Well, and it's always about, they were offered everything but the money. And yes, I think that Keir and Wes Streeting are quite macho, and it's not the way I would negotiate. However,
I mean, that's the first time anyone's ever said that about either of them.
No, they're sort of, they like to sort of bang tables and things.
You've been doing quite well that this evening.
I know. I keep trying to stop it, but I do think you get to the point of, how can it be any worse? I mean, it's just what are these doctors doing?
I think the fact that even lefty like Scarlett has lost patience with the doctors just shows you how much they've lost the public here. They wouldn't even ballot their own members on this strike because they know they do not have support. Their pay demands are absolutely outrageous. They're demanding something like 30. They've had a 30% pay rise. They're demanding more. They're using
Come on, don't exaggerate. It's 29.6.
They're using CPI inflation, which is also not a measure that is commonly used by economists. Their pay demands are absurd. All these strikes are doing is holding patients to ransom at a time when NHS waiting lists are already so long. Patients are suffering. People are waiting for operations in agony. And I think that the government is discovering the absolute mistake. I think its first mistake was on coming into government, immediately acceding to this union's demand by giving them a huge pay rise. It's now finding that there's no amount of money that is enough to appease this very hard left trade union. And so it's made up these training places. Do we need them? Don't we? I mean, it's very unclear. It doesn't seem like what they're doing here is in the national interest. It's in the interest of appeasing the BMA.
Now, we're about to experience something historical on Cross Question because you, panel, are going to experience our first YouTube question.
Wow.
Brace yourselves. It's from Chrissy. What would you do to make awful April a little less awful? Now, the average annual household bill is set to rise by more than £200 from today, with various tax rises and other cost increases having come into effect. And that's all while the increases in daily spending caused by the war in Iran continue to rise. It's an awful phrase, actually, isn't it? Awful April. I mean, we usually have these things about January being really sort of horrible and sort of dark. Harriet, how would you make awful April a little less awful?
Well, the tourism reform are both calling for VAT to be taken off energy bills, so that could be a solution. I'm sort of less convinced by what the Greens have put forward to subsidise all energy bills. But I think
they're copying Liz Truss.
Oh yeah, potentially.
And the disaster that follows.
Yes, I think ultimately one of the things that would that people would fill in their pockets most is something to do with the cost of food in supermarkets. I mean, we've seen the Chancellor's been meeting with supermarket bosses today. And I think the Food and Drinks Federation have said that food inflation could go up by 9% this year, which is just astronomical on top of what...
I'll tell you what, in MS Food, and food inflation is way above that in my experience at Charing Cross Station.
Stockpiling from Clapham M&S.
No, not Clapham, Charing Cross. Alice?
I would cut taxes so people can keep more of their own money, and at the same time I would have a big packet of spending cuts to reduce the size of the state and convince the bond markets that we could perhaps still borrow a little to perhaps help people out. I mean, I really dislike the messaging that the government is putting out that the supermarkets are somehow to blame for inflation that is caused by global factors. Supermarkets are in fact one of the most highly efficient competitive sectors there are. They operate at tiny profit margins, so the suggestion that they're price gouging when in fact they try very, very hard to keep prices as low as possible, I think is really unfair. I think really what the government should do is allow people, as far as they can, to keep more of their own money by keeping taxes low.
Russian.
I mean, firstly, 27th of April is my birthday, so I dispute that the whole of April is awful. But for those of you that won't be eating cake with me, I think one of the challenges that we've seen is the level of NEETs, the unemployment amongst 16 to 24-year-olds is now like 13%. And actually, I'd like us to see a cut in NI, so undoing that, because I thought that was a terrible policy in the first place. But let's make it easier and cheaper for businesses to get hiring, because anything we can do to get more people into jobs is a good thing.
Scarlett?
I think we have to remember that actually quite a lot of things go up, like pensions, like the minimum wage, that actually some people will be better off in April, that it's not that awful in April. And I think when people talk about cutting the state, I mean, it's really interesting. Very easy to say, yeah, of course we want fewer taxes. But oh no, we want nursery provision, we want better schools, we want better hospitals. I think it's very, very difficult. And the real, I mean, when you saw the welfare thing, there was a real outcry about trying to cut welfare for disabled, because they were doing the PIPs for disabled people. So I actually think that it sounds very easy making cuts, but the problem is the cuts hurt real people.
It was an outcry from Labour backbenchers. It was an outcry from the public about things like Motability and people having...
OK, we're running out of time, so let's finish off with our fun question. It is from Martha in Streatham. With NASA launching its new mission to the moon tonight, if you were going on a 10-day trip into space, which famous person would you want in the spaceship with you? Resham.
Oh, it'd have to be Rihanna. Who else is going to entertain me for 10 days?
Okay, Alice?
I mean, I think I would want to... I mean, if I'm going into space, I think I want to be up there with an astronaut. So I'm going to choose Tim Peake.
Okay. Harriet?
I'm going to go with JFK, just because I think it's a bit of a full circle moment. So yeah, that's my pick.
You're going to exhume him?
Yeah, well, you did say dead or alive.
All right, Scarlett.
Well, you see, dead or alive, I'd take Darwin, because I just would learn so much about how everything works.
Okay, well, there's some varied answers there, it has to be said. Thank you all very much indeed for coming on the panel tonight. Tomorrow, we have the former Conservative Minister Greg Hands, political commentator and former Labour advisor Stella Sankidu, journalist and former newspaper editor David Wooding, plus the comedian and journalist Ava Vidal. So that's a varied panel for you tomorrow night here on Cross Question. Coming up in the next hour, we're going to talk about space. Oh yes, we are, because we've got this Artemis mission, which is going to be taking off about 11 o'clock, we think. Why are we all so interested in space? It's been 50 years since certainly the Americans have gone into space. And yet this has captured the public's imagination, I think. Now, there are lots of people out there who are absolutely devoted to everything to do with space. And I want to hear from you over the next hour to understand why. My first childhood memory was watching Neil Armstrong land on the moon in 1969. I've never forgotten it.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and...
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock, Donald Trump's preparing to address Americans overnight after warning he's seriously considering pulling out of NATO. The president yesterday suggested the war with Iran could be over in 2 to 3 weeks and earlier said that Iran had asked for a ceasefire. But Tehran has called the claims false and baseless. Former First Sea Lord Admiral Lord West told LBC it would be difficult to extract the US from NATO.
NATO actually doesn't just look after Europe, it protects the eastern flank of America. And our Navy was the second most powerful in NATO. And we provided forces to help protect the American East Coast from what were then Soviet missile threats.
The Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, says an LBC investigation into illegal care homes has unearthed unspeakable evil. We've learned of more than 800 which aren't registered with Ofsted, meaning they've never faced inspection. In one case, a 15-year-old girl was sexually abused by 2 staff members at a home in County Durham. The government's pulled 1,000 training posts as it had threatened to unless a strike by resident doctors was called off. It had given the British Medical Association until tonight to postpone next week's 6-day walkout, but the union said it wanted a credible offer on pay and jobs first. Scott Mills says he fully cooperated with a police investigation into an alleged historical sex offence as he addressed rumour and speculation since his sacking from the BBC. Detectives dropped the case over a lack of evidence. Earlier, the corporation revealed it dismissed the radio presenter over separate new information. NASA's preparing to launch its first crewed mission to the moon in more than 50 years. Artemis 2 is due to blast off from Florida tonight, taking 4 astronauts into lunar orbit. The crew is on board and final tests are now underway. Rebecca Boyle is a journalist covering astronomy and told LBC what the purpose of the mission is.
Really, the main reason for this mission is they want to test this new spacecraft. It's been, 54 years since anyone has been to the moon, and we have a new spaceship now. It's designed like Apollo was. It's a similar shape, but it's never flown before with people in it. Right. So this is a really important test to make sure it can get there safely and get home.
LBC weather. Patchy rain moving southeastwards across Wales, central and southern England tonight. Thicker cloud building across the northwest of the UK. A low, of -3. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's 4 minutes past 9. Welcome to the programme. We're going to do something a little bit different in this hour because, mainly because I want to, because I don't know how many of you are a little bit should we say, tired of every day we talk about Donald Trump, every day we talk about cost of living. These are obviously very, very important issues. But today I think there is something important happening. We're always told on Star Trek that space is the final frontier. And that frontier was smashed effectively in the 1960s, wasn't it? When you had the Americans and the Soviets going up against each other in the space race. And then on July the 20th, 1969, 5 days after my 7th birthday, Neil Armstrong was the first man to set foot on the moon. One giant step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Have I got that right? I think I have. I haven't got it right, apparently. Chris, put it on the screen so I can get it right next time. And I think those of us of a certain age, and bear in mind I was 7 years old when that happened, and I remember my dad getting me out of bed. It was about 10 o'clock at night, getting me out of bed saying, you've got to come and watch this. You'll remember it for the rest of your life. And he was right. I mean, I can remember exactly where the television was. It was small black and white television on our sitting room table. And we all just stood there watching this because we knew it was really momentous. Now, this Artemis mission that's going to take off in about 2 hours' time, and I'm sure James Hansen will be covering it on his show after I've finished, I think it's symbolically important. I'm not quite sure exactly what the point of it is. We're going to talk in a moment to an expert who can tell us. Because they're not actually going to land on the moon. That's what I assumed was going to happen, but apparently not. They are planning a landing on the moon maybe in a couple of years' time. I think President Trump is determined that should happen before his term of office finishes. And there is so much more to discover in space, isn't there? We've had lots of missions in space. We've had lots of people go into space, but nobody's gone to the moon for many, many decades. It's obviously a hugely costly thing to do. And I think once the Soviet Union disintegrated, there was less of an impetus because it was basically seen as a capitalism versus communism thing. And America couldn't let the communist Soviet Union get one up on it in the space race. They did do that in the 1960s, it has to be said. So why are we still so fascinated by space? Is it because we don't know still enough about it? It's a bit of a mystery. There will be people listening who believe that there are other life forms in space somewhere. We just haven't found them yet. And there is a certain logic to that if you think about it. I mean, why would we be the only life forms in the whole of the universe? There's no reason to think that we are. Just because we haven't discovered other life forms yet doesn't mean that they don't exist. So why are you personally fascinated by space? Will you be all agog watching this liftoff of Artemis at about 11 o'clock our time? Give me a call, 0345 6060 973. Well, let's talk to Dr. David Whitehouse, who's an astronomer and science writer. He's the author of books including The Moon, A Biography. Now, I'm tempted to say that must be quite a short book because we don't know an awful lot about it, David. But I mean, it's a fascinating. It's a book title that would make me pick up the book in Waterstones, I have to say. We might come on to that in a moment. But just tell us what this mission today is all about.
This mission is to test the Space Launch System, which is the system which is going to take astronauts on that landing. Part of the components we're going to take them on the landing on the moon in a couple of years' time. So this is to test the Orion capsule in which they will live, to take these 4 astronauts for the first time, it's been said, round the moon, the first time anybody's left low Earth orbit since 1972. So it's a very dramatic mission. This Space Launch System is a rocket which is more powerful than the Saturn V rocket, which took over the Apollo astronauts to the moon in the 60s and 70s. And the first 10 minutes of this flight, and the window opens at, I think, 11:24, first 10 minutes are going to be like few things you've ever witnessed in terms of those solid rocket boosters, in terms of the main core firing, in terms of its shedding its stages as it goes up into Earth orbit. It's going to be, should it all work, quite dramatic. But that's the start of it. Then they spend a day around the Earth in a high orbit, and 1 day and 1 hour after the liftoff, they fire the rocket to take them into what's called TLI, translunar injection, and then they head for the moon.
How dangerous is this? Because my last memory of watching anything live of this nature was watching the Challenger, what was it called? Space Shuttle, the Challenger space shuttle lifting off, was it 1987, I want to say? 86. And then I remember watching the pictures, and then you could just tell that it had gone wrong, because I just remember thinking to myself, I'm not sure it should be that shape anymore. And we all know what happened then. And that was really, I mean, that kind of almost signalled the end of an era, didn't it?
It was a realisation. I too watched that. And of course, I knew, having seen many shuttle flights launched before that, I knew exactly what happened, why it happened, and the fact that the crew stood no chance whatsoever of survival. It was a realisation. It was a, what on earth were we thinking about doing it this way? And it was rather like the deaths of the Apollo 1 crew on the pad in the mid-1960s, which the fire that killed 3 astronauts, which forced the re-evaluation of the Apollo system and actually helped them do it properly and get to the moon. The deaths of the astronauts on Challenger and Columbia really did bring home the seriousness of going into space. This is not routine. The crew on the SLS have a launch escape system, so they are much safer than the space shuttle, which remarkably had no escape system whatsoever. But none of this crew and nobody who goes into space is ever thinking this is routine. You do not fly to the moon. You do not go into space routinely. This is still a rocket, a controlled explosion, the liberation in a short time of a vast amount of energy, the energy equivalent of a nuclear weapon. And you're riding it up into space. So most of the time it will go well. And one astronaut told me, he said something like, most of the time it goes well until we get a problem. And I said, what happens then? And he looked at me and he said, a problem. Sometimes the problem's going into space because of the energies involved. You may not escape with your life. So they know what's at stake when they launch tonight.
Well, we all recall the phrase, Houston, we have a problem.
Yes, we do, yes.
Are there other countries that can compete with America? Is there a new space race about to happen? Because I think China has a space program, doesn't it? I think India does as well. I'm not quite sure how developed that is. But is there going to be a new space race?
Oh, yeah, that's a very good question, because there certainly is. India is developing its own rockets to launch its own astronauts, but that's going to be many years away. It is China that America's got the eyes on, because the problem with America going back to the moon is it's pulling together lots of different systems to try and make a thing work to put people back on the moon. You've got the thing going off tonight, the Space Launch System. It's a relic of the shuttle. You've got Elon Musk's system to marry with that, which is a different type of design whatsoever. And trying to get all that to work is going to be difficult. But they're in a race with China, because China's going to put people back on the moon in a few years' time. But they're doing it in a much more Apollo-like way, because their objective is just to get there. Because they think that, well, they regard themselves, actually, if they work right at a steady pace of space exploration, they want to be the world's leading spacefaring nation in a couple of decades. And their aim is, when you look at the moon in a few years' time, irrespective of whether America gets back there, they want people not to remember the glory days of Apollo. They want them to think China is there now. So yes, there is a very strong race between America and China in terms of getting back on the moon. And that's why America is actually hedging its bets a bit. It's talking about a moon base. It's talking about going on to Mars, because they know that China may well beat them to the surface of the moon. So they've got to think more long term after the PR hit they will get built with that. So very interesting times in space at the moment.
Let's talk a bit about your book, because, I mean, I imagine that you look to me, I can see you on screen, you look about a similar age to me. Were you?
Actually, I had exactly the same experience with my dad on that July night. But my dad wanted to send me back, didn't want me to get up. He wanted me to go to bed. That was an argument I was not going to lose. and as you, I've never gotten over that time. It's changed everybody's life.
But did that spark your interest in this? Because, I mean, to have written a book called The Moon, a biography, I mean, you must have had a really long-term interest in all of this.
I put my interest, yes, I was very interested before that, but when people ask, I say my interest is down to a multimillionaire. And that's because when I was 5 years old, shopping with my mother on the Soho Road in Birmingham, I bought a book at F.W. Woolworth. And it was F.W. Woolworth, who was the multimillionaire, who started me on this course. I got this book. It wasn't the book I wanted for Christmas. So, you know, as a 5 or 6 year old, it's, I don't want it. You cry and you moan. A few days later, I read it and I was hooked. You know, write to Patrick Moore, get a letter back from Patrick Moore. And, you know, from then on, it's been, I've been fortunate beyond measure to have a career in space and writing about space and doing space. And I've been waiting all my life after 1972 for people to go back to the moon.
Well, definitely, whenever it is that they do actually do a trip to land on the moon, we'll definitely have you back on. What is the point? This may be a stupid question. What is the point of the moon?
The moon has always been with us. It was there before any life started on Earth. It's part of the reason why life could have started on Earth may well be because of the moon. The moon keeps the axis of the Earth in roughly the same direction and gives us stable climatic zones and stable seasons. It gives us the tides, which are important for many forms of biological life. It stirs up the oceans. The moon is important physically for the development of the Earth. The moon also protects us from impacts from space. But the moon has been... When I wrote the book on Apollo about the moon, a biography, I was looking for a word which describes the moon, its relationship with us. Is it an observer of the Earth? Is it as a companion with the Earth? No, it's intertwined with life. It's intertwined with our psychology and our mentality. The moon is an accomplice to the affairs of humanity in space.
Well, I think that's absolutely right, because there are days on LBC or nights on LBC where sometimes, shall we say, and we get a certain type of caller on, and sometimes I have a little conversation in one of the breaks with the producers, and we ask, is it a full moon tonight?
Now yes, fascinating you should say that, because one of the things I tried to pin down in the moon biography is that does a full moon cause human behaviour to be a bit weird? Which you have noticed. And the strange thing is that you've noticed it. Policemen in Los Angeles and in London doing patrols on full moon nights notice it. People in hospitals, in A&E notice it. But somehow when you do the statistics, it doesn't come out quite as strongly as what people think. And that is the point of the moon. You cannot, its influence on us, you cannot quite put your finger on it. It's important and it does affect us, and it's very slippery to work out how.
You see, I've been, I think, in this programme tonight rather more frivolous than I normally am, right from the start. And I'm now, because it is a full moon tonight, apparently, I've just been told.
Exactly.
And I'm thinking, well, is this affecting me in some way? It's controlling my brain in some way.
It does have an effect. It does have a psychological effect on humans. In some ways, we don't fully understand the mechanisms by which the moon affects us. It affects us psychologically. One thing it doesn't affect us is sort of tidally, in the sense. People say, well, we're mostly made of water, and the moon affects tides, therefore, why doesn't it affect us? Well, that process doesn't work. It's a psychological, physical process. But remember, every living thing on planet Earth, since there were single cells, which we have evolved from, was influenced and programmed by the rhythms of the moon. The rhythms of the moon and tides are in every single cell of our bodies and in every cell of every living thing on Earth, from trees, from plants, from fish, from birds to ourselves. It's intertwined with us. There's a saying, I think, from the American native Indians, which says, no moon, no man. and they're perfectly right. It's important to us, and we wouldn't be the same without the moon.
Is it just a coincidence that this space trip is taking off on a full moon?
No, definitely not. No, because it has to launch at the time of the full moon because of the geometry of the approach and the fact that as it goes around the far side of the moon, it has to be sunlight. There has to be a lot of sunlight there because this crew is going to see parts of the moon because they're going to be the furthest people ever from the Earth, 5,000 miles further than the moon. Nobody's ever travelled that far away, and they will be able to look at the poles of the moon and actually see illuminated on the far side of the moon things which have never been seen before by the human eye, because the Apollo astronauts just flew around the equator and didn't see that far up. So it's no coincidence that the launch window starts in, I think, an hour, 2 hours' time, lasts for 2 hours. We don't have a definite launch time at the moment, but it's timed for when the rocket goes up, the full moon will rise.
So what you're saying is that we are likely to get, I mean, I don't know whether there'll be live pictures or what, but we are going to get some amazing pictures that we've never seen before.
From the moon, yes, we will indeed, because this crew are in a unique position. They're not going into orbit around the moon, they're going swinging around the moon. And they will be able to look, I mean, we've got tremendously detailed images of the whole surface of it. We've mapped the moon in intricate detail, but it's been done with satellites, with cameras on unmanned satellites. For the first time, people will see it, and that's actually built into their timeline. Into the timeline of their scientific observations, it actually says on their sheets of what to do, react, think about it, what do you think, describe what you can see. And this crew are very good at doing that. So we should get some fabulous pictures and I think a few surprises from as they go around the far side of the moon.
I hope the Wi-Fi's working. Jamie says there's a better view in the Lake District. Ever the cynic. I'm now regretting, David, that we haven't got you in the studio for the whole hour answering questions from our listeners, which we might try and find an opportunity to do that. I don't know where
I
you're
would
based,
welcome
but,
that. Thank you.
We'd love to have you. It's been absolutely fascinating talking to you. Watch your Amazon book rankings after this programme, because David's book is called The Moon, A Biography. I'm going to be ordering it when I get home, I can tell you that for nothing. David, enjoy later. I mean, I just can't imagine what will be going through your head given all of your experience in this. I hope it lives up to what you're expecting.
I think anybody who watches it tonight will never forget it.
Thank you very much indeed. That's Dr. David Whitehouse there. His book is called The Moon, A Biography. Right, we're going to come to your calls in a minute. Why are we so fascinated by space travel, given the vast majority of us will never get the chance to experience it? And also, I mean, let's talk a little bit about the subject of a full moon. Are you affected by a full moon? I may regret asking that question, but I'm going to anyway. It's 22 minutes past 9.
Weekdays from 7 a.m.
This is shameful. This is a shambles.
Straight to the point.
How was that allowed to happen?
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
Show some evidence, Minister.
Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app. Download it now from your app store. LBC.
You've probably been with the same energy supplier for decades. And why wouldn't you be? Loyalty matters. But lately, bigger hasn't always felt better. You've probably dealt with long waits and endless automated menus in search of someone who can actually help. Octopus Energy is now Britain's biggest energy supplier, trusted by over 8 million customers, because we do things differently. Our people focus on the most important thing, you. When you call, you'll speak to a real person. No robotic scripts, no computer says no, just an honest conversation with someone who actually wants to help. Join the millions who've already made the move. Octopus Energy, recommended by Which? A record 9 years running. Visit octopus.energy/better for verification.
At Lidl, find your move with the new Crivet running range. Grab a pair of carbon running shoes for only $39.99 with advanced EVA soles and carbon plates. These and other Crivet products will get you over the line for sure. Available in store now. Lidl, more to value. 18 plus GB only while stocks last.
Your time is valuable. Your perspective should be too. The Economist cuts through the noise with the stories that truly shape your world.
How can you believe that a new regime won't crush you just like the previous one?
Online scams are stranger than they've ever been.
When the world's turned upside down, know which way is up. Read, watch, or listen to The Economist.
Iain Dale. Text 84850. This is LBC.
24 minutes past 9 on LBC. Shahid says, I think it's worth pointing out that China did send an astronaut into space in 2003, which took the West by surprise, and it was a worry too. I do vaguely recall that, and nobody seemed to have known that it was going to happen. Shows how good intelligence services are, doesn't it? Right, let's go to Jack in Rayleigh in Essex. Hello, Jack.
Good evening, Iain.
Hi.
Well, I'm really pleased you're covering this subject tonight. I've been an amateur astronomer for 60 plus years.
Goodness me.
And I was one of the first outsiders to see the moon rock and dust samples brought back by Armstrong and Aldrin, Apollo 11, in November 1969 at Queen Mary College, University of East London in the chemistry department. Our teacher took us there after school because he was doing his PhD in chemistry, and we went up there and took us up there, and these samples were small and they were enclosed, but they knew they were safe. They'd already examined them closely, but they had to be protected for the chemical analysis that was being carried out at the chemistry department, because NASA didn't have the means of doing all the analysis, so they farmed out small samples to the universities, and they could only bring back a very limited payload at that time. And that's what got me into astronomy in November 1969. And I'm a member of a couple of astronomical societies, and we do outreach. And when the moon is up, usually half moon, and that is the number one wow object that people absolutely love to see. It's bright, it's close, you can see so much detail.
Yeah, that's true.
That's the object people love to see. And of course, the rings of Saturn and Jupiter and all these close by objects. So, yeah.
And do you believe that moon dust that you saw was absolutely genuine?
Yes, I do.
Because I want to read you out a text I've got here, and I'd rather you answer this than me. Travis says, Hi Iain, do you honestly believe that men landed on the moon back in 1969? If so, do you believe in God, Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny? You honestly believe that they had the technology back in the 60s to land there and essentially live stream it back to Earth with such well-scripted speeches? Biggest hoax known to man. Well, that's from Travis in Durham. I saw it. Okay, as a 7-year-old, I suppose I wasn't in no position to judge whether it was real or not. But what's your view on that?
Well, it took around 400,000 people in the United States, contractors, subcontractors, to get all this together, space suits and all the parts that had to be made for the Saturn V rocket and everything. And it was a huge operation, and only America could really pull it off. The Russians, incidentally, bankrupted themselves trying to reach the moon, and they almost beat the Americans to it, but they didn't. How do you keep 400,000 plus people quiet?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think, look, there are so many conspiracy theories out there. I mean, people don't believe that JFK was murdered in the way that most people do. I mean, we can go back and sort of examine loads of them. I believe that man landed on the moon, and I don't think anybody's ever come up with any reasonable explanation as to why that wouldn't be true.
The landing sites are still there. The remnants of what they left are still there. We measure the distance from the Earth to the moon to a very high degree of accuracy because of the reflectors that were left by the Apollo astronauts on the moon. We shine a laser, We time how long it takes to come back. That gives us the distance. The distance varies because of the orbit very slightly, but we can get fantastic measurements of the distance, which I believe is receding at 3 centimetres a year away from us. How do we get those measurements from an observatory? Put the reflectors up there.
Well, I think I would trust you, Jack, rather than Travis in Durham, to be honest. Although he is from Norfolk, so that does make me sort of want to trust him. Thank you very much indeed. Marion says, yes, it is a full moon tonight at about 10:56. I'm definitely affected by a full moon and know that some people in the Bethlehem Hospital and mental health units are sometimes. I volunteered there for over 30 years, but as your guest said, studies don't definitively demonstrate this. I believe drivers' traffic habits alter at full moon. Love your show, Ian, says Marion. Thank you very much indeed, Marion. Right, we'll take more of your calls in a moment. Why are you so fascinated with space? Are you affected by a full moon? 0345 6060 973. Darryl Jackson has the LBC News headlines at 9:30.
Iran has rejected claims by Donald Trump that they asked for a ceasefire, calling them false and baseless. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister has dismissed the US President's comments that he's seriously considering leaving NATO. Scott Mills says he has been subject to rumour and speculation after being sacked by the BBC earlier this week. In a statement released by his lawyer, the presenter says he fully cooperated with a police investigation in 2018, which was eventually dropped. And NASA's preparing to launch its first crewed mission to the moon in more than 50 years. Artemis 2 is due to blast off from Florida tonight, taking 4 astronauts into lunar orbit. LBC weather, patchy rain moving southeastwards across Wales, central and southern England tonight. Thicker cloud building across the northwest, a low of -3.
LBC.
Go all Irish to France with great low prices. With Irish Ferries, you can for less. Irish Ferries, see travel differently. T's and C's apply.
Hey, Harry. Hello, mate. Got any tips for the football? Your best bet is to head over to BetVictor. They're giving new customers a terrific welcome offer. If you bet a minimum of £10, they'll give you £30 in free bets.
Phew, that's a steal of a deal.
It's a good darn deal that'll make you squeal for real. Neil?
My name's not Neil.
I know, but it rhymed.
Listen to Harry and make your best bet on the football at BetVictor. 18 plus, opt in and bet on any football marketing at odds of evens or greater. No cash out, 7-day expiry. Terms and conditions apply. Gambleaware.org.
With over 50 years experience, Fidelity can help you feel confidently invested. Make the most of your annual allowances by the 5th of April with our expert insights, excellent service and wealth of investment options. For ISAs, pensions or advice, go to fidelity.co.uk. Your capital is at risk. Terms apply.
Tesco Insurance are driving down the cost of motoring with 10% off car insurance. Take out a car insurance policy before the 15th of May 2026 and you'll get 10% off with club card prices. We offer a range of cover options, so you can choose the one that's right for you. Save 10% when you buy or renew a car policy with Tesco Insurance. Search Tesco Car Insurance and get a quote direct today. Club card required. Excludes add-ons. T's and C's apply.
Iain Dale. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
It's 9:32 on LBC. We're talking about space, particularly because this Artemis spacecraft is going to, or space rocket, I don't know what you call it, it is going to take off at, just after 11 p.m. tonight. I think it's going to be quite some. Unfortunately, I'm going to be on a train, so I suppose I might be able to get it on my phone. Why are we so fascinated with space, given that 99.999% of us recurring will never actually experience it? I feel so delighted for anybody who's always dreamed of being an astronaut and manages to actually go into space. I mean, it must mean it must mean the Earth to them. Sorry, I know, I won't do it again. Let's go to John in Hammersmith. Hello, John.
Man, that was pretty sad.
Hi. I blame it on the full moon.
Yeah, like you, I was glued to the TV that night in '69. One small step for man, a giant leap for mankind. It was astonishing.
How old were you?
I ain't telling you.
All right.
older than you are.
Well, I gathered that.
Still nice. So, some numbers for you. I got the Telegraph here, so you can take that as you will. So the first moon landing of the Artemis program is scheduled for early 2028, a year ahead of schedule and 2 years ahead of China, which is apparently they were going to be taking longer, but Jared Isaacman, who's the new NASA administrator, he said that with that we're going to go full tilt, and so they're going a year ahead of schedule, which is wonderful. And a quote for you: "This time we will not only plant our flag and leave our footprints, we will establish a foundation for an eventual mission to Mars and perhaps someday to many worlds beyond." And that's Mr. Trump himself. Directive 1, NASA's space policy directive 1 is to get the U.S. back to the moon. So they're planning on building a space base to facilitate a trip to Mars, which I think is first class. It's absolutely wonderful. And to answer your question as to why we're delighted about space travel, we're all geeks. That's it. We're travelers, we're explorers. Human beings are meant to walk and look for food, so we're used to going to places we've never been before. And the moon, hey, that's what,
I think you're absolutely onto something there, because there are still new things to discover on Earth, but most discoveries have been made, I suspect, over the last century or so. So it's natural that we should look elsewhere, I guess.
There's also, just to be a little concupiscent, if you'll forgive the word.
A little what?
Concupiscent.
Goodness me.
Conscious of money.
Okay.
Lithium, platinum, iridium, palladium, titanium, and helium-3, which you can use for nuclear fission. So, and of course, they're going around the poles. They're looking for ice. If you can find water, that's rocket fuel right there. You split it out, oxygen and hydrogen, recombine it. That's rocket fuel right there. So there's all sorts of reasons that they're going back. It's not just a hi, how do you do it? They're looking for the good stuff.
Okay, John, thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Natasha, who is a first-time caller in West Hampstead. Hello, Natasha.
Hi, Ian. Thank you for taking my call.
Pleasure. Thank you.
I just wanted to share with you my interest in the moon that I've had for many, many years. I've always been fascinated about the moon when I was, since a very young age, going on long family trips and realizing how the moon would always follow us whilst driving on the motorways. And from there on, I just had a deep fascination about space as I was growing older, and to which led me to study at Queen Mary in Westfield College, which is what your first caller, the
yes.
gentleman who was speaking to you. So I studied aeronautical engineering in the mid-90s, simply for this fascination about space. So,
were you the only woman?
I was one of 4 initially, and it was a 3-year program, but unfortunately the other 3 ladies, they decided to drop out, so I was the only one who graduated at the time. So, yes.
And what, may I ask, have you done with that qualification?
Yeah, so I used to work for the first few years, graduated. I worked for Defence for a few years. And then I moved into IT, so working currently as an IT consultant in AI. So I know I'm not directly linked to aeronautics as such, but I try to still keep my interests outside work on space, which is why I'm really looking forward to watching the events this evening.
What do you hope that we can gain from this kind of mission? Because this is not going to be the last one. Obviously, we know that in a couple of years' time, they want to land some people on the moon again. What would you hope that we could discover?
I'm hoping that it's obviously the safety aspects of it. And as your previous callers have also mentioned, the data that will be retrieved. So all the scientifically data and the stability of if ever there's going to be a station, a base placed on there. I'd like to leave things as natural as possible. So, but still, it's just out of interest, just kind of what measurements can be taken as what the scientists have previously done over the centuries for people there.
And do you watch a lot of films, television programs that are based on things to do with space and the moon? I mean, I've got a little list here, like Star Trek, Star Wars, Apollo 11, Armageddon, Doctor Who, Lost in Space, Blake 7, Red Dwarf. Shall I go on?
Absolutely. You can go on, but they're all common interests. Yes, absolutely, and it's all been born it's all been born from my interest and fascination about astronomy. So I also belong to a couple of the astronomical groups around the area as well. So and interested because of the full moon, but unfortunately you can't see anything right now, but because of the cloudy vision. But yeah, I'm really interested in all these. These programs that I've been watching and also reading as well. I used to read a lot of science fiction books, Isaac Asimov and such. But yeah, so it's kind of like built in me, I suppose, this interest.
It is one of the most beautiful sights, I think, in the world is when you feel that you're close up to a full moon, by which I mean, I remember some years ago driving home along the A21, and the full moon was like directly ahead, and it was just massive. I don't know what the word for that is, but it was literally as if it was about to as a supermoon, as if it was about to land on the horizon of the A21, and you could literally see all of the different valleys in the moon. It was so close.
Yes. And that's amazing because I remember the first time I saw a supermoon. I hadn't realized what it was. I was quite young. And I thought the building, as it was rising, I thought the building opposite us, so quite some distance away, was actually on fire because it was like bright red as well. And as it was reaching, kind of like rising, I then noticed it was actually the moon. But it was astonishing, just the sights of it and the photos all around the world that, when such events with the moon happen. It's just amazing looking at all these photos as well. So.
Well, according to one of my correspondents here, it is T-4.
Looking forward to that.
Get your mug of hot chocolate ready because it's going to be quite something. Thank you very much indeed for giving us a call, Natasha. Grace is in Ealing. Hello, Grace. I don't know why I said that with such surprise because you've always been in Ealing.
I have indeed, yes. I heard you read out a message from someone who kind of suggested that believing in God was ridiculous, which is fair enough. I'm very well aware that lots of people think that. But for me, actually, space is, and things that scientists have discovered about it, is a clue towards belief in God. And a summary from Time magazine, because it's fairly mainstream, the incredible fine-tuning of the universe presents the most powerful argument for the existence of an immanent creative entity, which we may call God, lacking convincing scientific evidence to the contrary. Such a power may be necessary to force all the parameters we need for our existence, cosmological, physical, chemical, biological, and cognitive, to be what they are. So that is to say that things that scientists, your guest at the beginning was talking about how the moon is to some extent necessary as part of how we've developed. And there are many things about the universe which are actually really central to the way that we've been able to evolve, to exist. And we don't necessarily realise this because we're in this particular situation, but scientists are finding more and more about how important so many of the parameters of our universe are really, really essential for our existence. So for me, it's one of the clues towards God, in contrast to what your texter was implying. But I'm well aware that a lot of people think I'm nuts for being a theist. I think that a lot of people like space in answer to your original question because there's so much beauty in the images that we see. And I think that when our world is a bit mad and there's violence and need and all kinds of things that are difficult to cope with, to look up at the stars that look so peaceful, to look at pictures where there are nebula and illustrations of planets that look so so peaceful and beautiful, is probably quite appealing, as well as being mysterious. And so we're kind of intrigued as well as awed by it. And I think we're kind of designed with this sense of wanting to know more about things and to be awed by the grandeur of things.
Well, I think
beyond ourselves.
that is true. But when you said that space effectively, according to this article, you say it was in Time magazine, where they said, well, there is no proof that God doesn't exist. I would turn that round and say, well, we know the moon exists because of the powers that it exerts over Earth. We know the sun exists for similar reasons. We can see it. And I mean, it goes back to our previous discussion that we had a couple of weeks ago about the meaning of the word faith. And I get that people who do believe in God have a faith that God is real. But for the rest of us, we need to have proof. And the proof is there that the moon exists, but there is no proof that God exists.
Well, no, what this article is actually saying is not there's not proof against God. What it's actually saying is that many things about the universe have to be so precisely fine-tuned to within an unimaginable degree of specificity that if they were ever so slightly different, we wouldn't have ended up existing. And so the odds against us existing are so stupendous, bigger than the number of atoms in the universe. It implies that there is a designer who has directed the evolution of the planets and ourselves. But I'm not very good at explaining all of this in a very eloquent way, because I'm not.
Well, I don't think anybody's been able to explain it, and that's why agnostics and atheists exist, because no one has been able to give any rational explanation for the existence of God beyond a sort of airy-fairy faith.
Well, like I just said, there are elements of the universe and of biology that imply that there needed to have been a designer, because the odds against things being just right in the way they need to be are so stupendous. But I think it's interesting also that we're quite keen, a lot of people, to believe in the existence of aliens, even though we've not seen any direct proof of them. But people are far less happy to believe in the idea of a God, which I find interesting philosophically. But whether it's aliens or just the planets themselves, I think in answer to your question at the beginning of the hour, we're kind of interested in things that are mysterious.
Yeah, and it's a bit like some people believe in ghosts because they've actually seen them, but nobody, as far as I know, do correct me if I'm wrong, but nobody has ever seen God.
Well, you wouldn't see God in the sense that we see other things normally, because God is not comprised of the particles that the light receptors in our eyes are able to detect when we see things. But a lot of people will testify to having had experiences of God in various ways, and experiencing things that they can't explain otherwise. But I'm not going to try to convince you of that, because it's such a personal thing that I know it would sound very odd to anyone who hadn't had those experiences. But people have experienced God in the way that some people claim to have experienced ghosts, certainly.
Somebody says, I'm not listening to a word that you say. That is not true, because I always listen to everything that you say, Grace, because I do find it very interesting. Thank you very much indeed. All right, taking more of your calls in a moment. Why are we so fascinated by space travel, given that most of us will never get to experience it? And I wonder if you could experience it. I mean, if you could, instead of spending sort of £1,000 on a summer holiday to Ibiza, if you had the opportunity to spend £1,000 going into space, even if it was only for an hour, would you do it? 0345 6060 973. It's 9:48.
Coming up at 10 on LBC, James Hansen.
Donald Trump will address the American people amid reports he's planning to wind down the war. Is this Trump chickening out? Plus, the first mission to the moon in 50 years is about to launch. We'll bring it to you live.
James Hansen at 10. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
It's hard to concentrate when you're worried about your health. It can feel like there's a wall between you and the rest of the world, like you can't be fully present.
Hello, AXA Health. How can I help?
At AXA Health Insurance, we build our teams with people who care. So when you need us, we're here to support you. For cover that cares, search AXA Health Insurance.
Pre-existing conditions are not covered.
Spring has sprung. Buy any 6 bottles of wine and save 25% at Waitrose. Perhaps a citrusy Lamonette agave, perfect with halloumi, fresh off the BBQ? Or Esprit de Puissigam with notes of ripe red berry. And maybe go all out with a crisp bottle of Veuve Clicquot champagne. Cheers to spring. Buy any 6 bottles of wine and fizz and save 25%. Waitrose, the home of food lovers. Selected stores online, subject to availability, excludes Scotland box wines and bottles price £6 or under, £100 or over.
All right, resistance up. Let's climb.
Okay, here we go.
Oh, my knee's playing up again.
Have you ever had it looked at?
No, but I've been doing a few stretches.
When my shoulder went, Benenden Health got me expert help. Showed me exactly where I was going wrong.
30 seconds, people.
Press play on your health with physiotherapy and much more. All for less than £16 per person per month. Search Benenden Health. Fee reviewed periodically. T's and C's apply. Qualifying periods apply for some services, including physio. UK only. Visit benenden.co.uk.
Interactive Investor would like to say welcome and thank you. Welcome to all our new investors who joined us over the past few months. And thank you to a certain competitor that decided to change their fee structure and sent them all our way. Visit Interactive Investor to see what you could save with our low flat fee. Interactive Investor. I think, therefore I. Remember, when investing, your capital is at risk.
Iain Dale on LBC.
10 to 10 on LBC. Houston, we have a problem. News coming in from Florida. There's a problem with the flight termination system on Artemis 2. It's a system designed to self-destruct the rocket if it were to go off course to stop any debris from harming people on Earth. Engineers are trying to fix this now, but if they can't, the launch won't be going ahead tonight. That's really disappointing news, isn't it? Because I think everyone was getting very excited about this. But, I mean, judging from that, it looks a little unlikely. Well, they may be able to fix it in the next hour and a half, but you'd have to doubt that. Mackie says, I've had a lifelong fascination with space, and my first memories are of the space shuttle missions in the 1990s. Travelling the world for work has meant I've been able to visit the most amazing space museums. I've been lucky enough to stand up close to both the space shuttles Enterprise and Endeavour. I've met the crew of the very last space shuttle blast-off in the Atlantis shuttle in the noughties. Pictures of this liftoff attached, but obviously I can't see those at the moment, that I took from the window of a Boeing 777 aircraft departing Orlando, very close to Cape Canaveral in Florida, making this possible. A real highlight was being able to stand at the very same podium that JFK stood at when he made his famous speech in the 60s about sending men to the moon and returning them safely to Earth. The best part of this was the exact script that he used was still on the podium, preserved in a Houston, Texas Space Museum, with the words highlighted by one of his advisors. I've also sat in the very same Mission Control Center, now a museum, that oversaw the operational control of all the missions of the last 50 years, including Challenger and Columbia. To me, space travel is a source of real fascination, and I've been lucky enough to indulge this over the years. What a great text. Because, I mean, clearly those experiences are things that live with you for a lifetime. You've actually just sparked off another space-related memory that I have from a trip that I made to the Soviet Union, a school trip in 1976, when we visited Leningrad and Moscow. And the official tour guides that we had on this trip, and bear in mind I was, 13 years old, they were very keen to impress on us that everything in Russia, it's a bit Trumpian this, everything in Russia was the biggest, the highest, the tallest, the longest, the heaviest. They were determined to convince us sort of capitalist fools from the West that the Soviet Union was the place to be. And I remember going to a museum, which I say it was a museum. It was more of an exhibition about the Soviet space capabilities. And you could see some of the Soyuz spacecraft, and there were lots of sort of memorabilia, a bit like Mackie was describing there in the things that he went to see. And it was absolutely fascinating to be able to touch something that had been in space. And you were allowed to touch things. It really was quite an experience. But it's it's the first time I've really thought about it, probably for like 50 years. So it's amazing what some of your texts can spark off in my memory. Right, let's take another couple of texts here. This is from David, who's a fisherman in Stockbridge. Good evening. I love the chap you had on talking about the moon and its relationship to us mere mortals. Aside from mood, it has a profound impact on my piscatorial expeditions across the world, pursuing so many species of fish. The first check is always, what is the moon doing? What are the tides doing? From bonefish on Bahamian flats to Norwegian salmon to the mighty eel, all are affected. That is something I must admit I wasn't aware of, that fish can be affected by the state of the moon. I was expecting to get quite a lot of calls on what a full moon does to affect you. I'm slightly disappointed that we haven't had more along those lines. Michael says, we know more about the moon than we do the deep oceans. The Mariana Trench remains unexplored. Am I going to be got at if I admit that I don't know what the Mariana Trench is? We've got 4 minutes before I hand over to James Hansen for you to tell me more about the Mariana Trench. Another text here from Andy, who says, I remember a school teacher brought into school a heat tile off a space shuttle. Let us all hold it. We had plastic gloves on because it had a dusty outer layer. She used to live near Cape Canaveral. See, that's the sort of thing, again, you experience in school something really special like that, and it, again, can have an effect on the rest of your life. And that's where school trips come in here, isn't it? You sort of go to, like the Science Museum in London, which I went to at primary school, they always had lots of sort of space exhibitions on. And I suppose that, given having seen the moon landing in 1969, I suppose that inspired an interest in space that's remained. James is in Guildford. Hello, James.
Hello, Ian. How are you?
Good, thank you. What would you like to say? Go ahead.
The quote. If you don't have the quote, I'm born too early to explore space, but born too late to explore the Earth. It's quite a cool little quote, right? And I think it kind of highlights that we're in an age where we have the ability to tap into a massive amount of information around what's happening around the planet Earth. And, you can go through history and see all the observations that have been made on the Earth. But, there's been a lot of observations around the universe, but we don't really have access to that much information in comparison to what we can tap into in around our local planet, right? And so, when I was a kid, my parents loved Star Trek, and so that probably sort of instilled in me a desire to see the universe and know more about space and etc. And one thing I would recommend to everyone is find your local observing group, or can I mention a company that does this, by the way, that sells telescopes?
Yeah.
So Harrison Telescopes is an online company that they sell first-hand, so brand new, second-hand telescopes, but I think you can rent from them as well for quite a low price, and then you can try them out. And, I would recommend, if anyone has the opportunity to get a little telescope, go outside. Don't go for the full moon because it'll burn your eyes out, but go on for a half moon and just look at it through the telescope, because the one thing that is amazing to see, the moon itself is amazing to see, but when you start seeing shadows being cast, over the mountain ranges on the moon, that is just something that you will never forget. You'll never forget seeing it, because you see them every day in the planet Earth, right? You see them all the time. But it is a truly unique thing to see them on another planetary body, and it's just an incredible thing to see, to get that sort of exposure that you can only see on paper, unless you get access to a telescope to then see it in person. And there are groups all over the country. You can find them online.
James, thank you very much indeed. Adrian says, I used to be affected by a full moon, but I'm all right. No. Okay, didn't work. The Mariana Trench is the deepest part of the ocean. It's in the Pacific to the east of the Philippines. The bottom of the sea is some 7 miles below sea level. 7 miles! That's amazing, isn't it? Well, thank you for all of your calls and messages this evening. I'll be back tomorrow from 7. If you missed any of this evening's show, you can listen back on our free Global Player app or the LBC app, where you can stay up to date with all the latest news, videos and opinion. Download the official LBC app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 1 on LBC, it's Richard Spur. But right now, in for Ben Kentish, here's James Hansen.
Thank you, Ian. Good evening. Coming up,
we're finishing the job, maybe 2 weeks, maybe a couple of days longer.
Donald Trump is due to address the American people in the next